Monday morning. Good morning, Mapito. How are you?
Good morning, Benjamin. I'm good. How are you?
I'm okay. It's a yellow Monday for you. It's a baby blue Monday for me.
For you.
And it's quite a blend. We'll do this today.
Yeah?
Are you looking forward to the week?
Am I looking forward to the week? I am, because I had a restful weekend. How about you?
Mine was semi-restful.
Okay, no, I had a really restful weekend, so I'm very excited to be here. I've got so much energy. Can't wait to see what the week has for us.
Okay, let's see how much we can drain out of it in the course of the week. But we're thankful that you've taken the time to join us. Shortly, we'll be serving you the news with Pakwesi Shandorf. But after that, Mapito?
So we have our newspaper review segment, and Executive Director for the Media Foundation for West Africa, Suleiman Abrahama, is our guest, Benjamin.
He always comes with fireworks, so we can expect nothing but that. But after that, we get into our big stories, and today we have a conversation with, guess whom? The government statistician, Professor Samuel Kobina-Enim. We'll be talking to him about the Consumer Price Index, that's the CPI, inflation, which now stands at 40.4% for October, and we'll also talk about the annual household income and expenditure statistics. We'll also talk about what the Ghana Statistical Service can do to help solve food security issues in Ghana. You don't want to miss that one. Mapito, recently we were talking about food, plantain at the Agric Ministry. Did you get to buy any from there?
No,
do you take plantain?
I don't eat plantain.
Oh, okay.
Sorry.
All right. We'll skip that one.
Also on the show, the Colleges of Education Teachers Association of Ghana and the Non-Teaching Staff Association are on strike. Now, these two unions are protesting what it says is the failure of the Fair Wages and Salaries Commission to make available to them a draft memorandum of understanding for their earlier negotiations. We also know that the groups are asking for equality in the disbursement of fuel, vehicle maintenance, and off-campus allowance. We'll hear from them on the show, and joining us for this conversation is Prince Obinghima, and he's the National CTAC President. He'll join us for this conversation. It's going to be a very interesting one.
Oh, yeah. Expect some fireworks on that one. But here's the big one. Another big one, I should say. Over the weekend, the Multimedia Group bagged 8 awards at the GJA, Ghana Journalists Association event. We'll be telling you about the winners on the show.
And my favorite part of the show is when you get the chance to join us with your thoughts on the issues we'll discuss on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. We'll also open our phone lines. We can't wait to hear from you.
We can't wait to hear from you because guess what? As we always say, the show is all about you. Thank you for staying. Up next, the news with Pakwesi Shandorf.
Good morning. It's a bright Monday morning. My name is Pakwesi Shandorf, and welcome to the AM News. Government is exploring the possibility of selling the Saglemi housing project to a private sector entity to complete and sell at no further cost to the state. That's according to the Minister for Works and Housing, Francis Asenso Boache. Speaking at a Ministry of Information press briefing, he said none of the 1,506 affordable housing units are habitable because the project lacks basic amenities.
As you may all know, the Saglemi Affordable Housing Project was initiated in 2012 for the delivery of 5,000 housing units at a total cost of $200 million under an engineering procurement contracting EPC agreement with Measures Constructura OAS Ghana Limited. By the end of the stipulated completion date, the original contract of the project had been amended 3 times, with the project scope reducing from the initial 5,000 housing units to 1,506 housing units. Although an amount of $195,969.52, approximately $196 million, representing 98% of the project funds, had been expended. That notwithstanding, the 156 housing units were at various stages of completion. And again, none of these 1,506 housing units were habitable because the project lacks basic amenities such as water, electricity, and other related amenities, which is a necessary condition for human habitation.
Away from that, now the Executive Director of the Environmental Protection Agency, Dr. Henry Kokofu, says that the Greater Accra Regional Coordinating Council is working to retrieve some of the encroached Sakumono Ramsar site lands. Speaking at the World Biosphere Day in Cape Coast, he said the continuous encroachment of Ramsar sites in Ghana may have disastrous consequences for the country if such illegalities are not dealt with head-on. Richard Kojenyako has the rest of the details.
Ramsar sites are identified wetland areas designated to be of environmental importance under the Ramsar Convention. The Ramsar Convention Treaty was signed in Ramsar in Iran in 1971 and became effective in 1975. And Ghana signed the Ramsar Convention on February 22, 1988. Wetlands help maintain the water table and also prevent flooding and reduce incidents of erosion. But today, many wetlands have been encroached upon. Speaking at the World Biosphere Day in Cape Coast, Executive Director of the Environmental Protection Agency, Dr. Henry Kokofu, urged the regional coordinating councils to protect the wetlands in their areas.
Ghana ratified the convention and the agreement to restore identifiable designated sites, and these are sites for people and for nature. Unfortunately, people being so greedy, you and I, decide to cheat nature. So what is reserved for nature, we want to take over all that. And we have a country where people think wetlands are wastelands. So unfortunate. So we've been able to conscientize people to understand this basic principle that you see a wetland somewhere, don't ever think it's a wasteland. It is also an important ecosystem resource that has its own potential and providing environmental systems, support to environmental systems. So yes, we have as a people destroyed most of the wetlands. We've encroached on them in the name of development, in the name of settlement. It is a bad idea. If you go to Sakumono, we've been able to retain a few acres of the land where EPA has planted coconuts, and we are protecting together with Wildlife Division of the Forestry Commission of Ghana. My understanding was recently the RCC, together with our officers, undertook to retrieve those encroached lands. We may succeed or we may not succeed, but the important thing is understanding the basis, the concept that comes around it. I have, throughout my research in some of these natural resource management systems and environmental protection, I've come to notice that we get all these laws and we get all these conventions, we bring them home without getting closer to the people, explaining the rationale.
Chief Director at the Ministry of Environment, Science, Technology and Innovation, Cynthia Sari, called for diverse approaches to protect Ghana's ecosystem.
Today, we are embarking on a formal annual journey to make a wake-up call to Ghanaians on the sustainable development approach to modern life and the leading and exemplary role that our 3 biosphere reserves and the other in the world network of biosphere reserves are playing towards conservation of our natural reserves.
Now, the District Chief Executive of Biakoye, Millicent Kabuki Kabo, was asking the newly inaugurated Traditional Council of Nkonya Woropon to ensure peace and fair traditional jurisprudence in the area. She also wants the council to help the assembly generate revenue for developmental projects in the area. There's more in this report by correspondent Peter Senu.
The Woropon Traditional Council, with 22 communities, lost its council status in 1966 after the overthrow of Ghana's first president, Dr. Kwame Nkrumah. Since then, several attempts have been made to regain a traditional council status. On the 11th of November 2022, this call was answered by the Ministry for Chieftaincy and Religious Affairs. After 56 years, LI 2409 now recognizes Urupon and Ahinkro traditional councils. The inauguration, the DC for Biakuya District, Millicent Kabuki Kabu, believes will be the first step in revenue mobilization for the assembly and development in the area. She is urging residents to consider paying their taxes regularly and promptly.
Taxes paid to the district assembly does not stay in the assembly. Part of it is brought back to the society for developmental agendas. For a long while now, Rupon traditional area was not inaugurated. Hence, they could not pay anything here. But from today, just like I promised all of them, I will ensure that in about a month's time, their offices will have a computer and then the necessary accessories to ensure that they are able to do their work. We derive our IGF through taxes or taxation of businesses, but most of the people do not actually want to pay. They give all kinds of excuses why they cannot pay. And I want to urge all those who own businesses in the whole of Biakoye to ensure that they pay their taxes and pay them timely.
The DC has also called on the Traditional Council to ensure peace and proper traditional jurisprudence in the area.
There has always been the notion that we need peace, but there cannot be peace without justice. So Nananom are to ensure that any time complaints come before them, they investigate and make sure that whoever needs to be penalized is penalized according to the wrongs done, and not, by giving any kind of judgment.
Let's now turn our attention to the Ashanti region, where the regional chairman of the opposition National Democratic Congress, Augustus Andrews, has retained his seat. This is the third time that Nana Kwesi, as is popularly called, is securing the seats, and new entrants for the positions of vice chairman and secretary, among others, were also elected. Naya Ojima has the rest of the story.
The election was delayed for over 2 hours. Election committee and some party leaders were locked up in a meeting with some aggrieved delegates to resolve some concerns raised over the election. The concern included claims of fraudulent voter register, which led to postponement of the youth conference on Friday. Member of the Ashanti Regional Council of Elders, Samuel Sapon, reviewed the meeting resolved all outstanding issues.
There was a little hitch. So far as the women's and then the youth election was concerned. General is around and he has been able to settle all the issues.
A total of 1,422 delegates were expected to cast their ballots. Office of Women's Commissioner was not put up for vote due to unresolved issues.
Augustus Andrews, we have 637 votes.
Incumbent chairman Augustus Andrews polled 637 votes against that of his closest contender, Evans Amankwa, who got 572 votes. Former chairman Yao Obimpe and Enoch Amwakunsia made 137 and 4 votes respectively. Mr. Andrews wants party members to unite for victory in the general election. All we want is a united front. Let's all unite and work for the party. There are no winners or losers in this election. Let us do away with factions and work towards increasing our votes in the region.
2024 elections, you bet to me every more seats, not your votes, so increasing.
Meanwhile, some newly elected executives reviewed preparedness for the task ahead.
We brought different visions whatsoever on board. We campaigned with different messages. We're going to sit as executive body, tailor them down, and get one vision for the region.
Delegates have spoken in very unequivocal terms. They have indicated what they want, the direction they want the party to go, and we dare not disappoint them. So
I'm a regional organizer. I alone cannot win this power. I will bring those people who lose these elections on board so that we will work together to bring NDC power. When we are together, we will win power.
For JoyNews, Kumasi.
Now, a 52-year-old businessman, Abdul Nazir Sani, has been retained as the Upper West Regional Chairman of the National Democratic Congress, pulling a total of 227 votes to beat his closest contender, Adam Ahassan Randi, who pulled 157 votes. The regional secretary of the party, Charles Luawan Puzing, also retained his position, flaming out the ambition of the former regional youth organizer, Nicodemus Derry. Rafik Salam has the rest of the story.
4 years ago, the Limairi-Boro starlet, Abdul Nasser Sani, entered the chairmanship contest as a clear favorite, competing against a weakened and underperformed incumbent chairman who lost everything, including 4 parliamentary seats to the MPP in the 2016 election and won by a landslide. This election is therefore a referendum on the leadership of Abdul Nasser Sani, popularly known as Chairman Bonas. The dynamics of this election is however different, with varied interest from several stalwarts and financiers of the party whose names are not on the ballot papers but want to pull strings in the party for their personal interest. Chairman Bonas, however, wants the status quo to remain, focused on the party's project of winning all 11 parliamentary seats, coupled with an increased presidential votes for the party, given another 4-year mandate. His lone challenger, 42-year-old business project consultant Adam Alasan Randi, agrees. However, he wants a change in the ship's captainship. 384 delegates have the mandate to decide their fate. The choreographed arrangement of the voting hall did little to reduce the tension and deep-seated rift. The highest point was when Adams Randi stepped up to exchange pleasantries with a high table and was given a cold shoulder. Former defense minister and chairman of the Council of Elders of the NDC, Alhaji Mohamed Risu, was admonishing the delegates to do the needful, went in for the jugular of the ruling MPP.
We are a family. We can never do anything right if we are not united. Look at the present government we have today, the disorder in NPP, because there is no rule for them to follow. Let us conduct this Congress, this election with honesty. Don't go and nominate or select people who cannot lead us.
After close to 3 hours of voting and sorting of the ballots, Upper West Regional Director of the Electoral Commission, Ali Osmanu Adamu, declared the results, retaining Bonas as the NDC Regional Party's chair, together with his scribe, lawyer Charles Luanga Pozun, who defeated old foe and former regional youth organizer Nicodemus Derry.
Charles Luanga Pozun polled 233 votes. Nicodemus NBD Derry polled 151 votes, and Charles Luanga Pozun is declared the winner of the election. Abdul Nasser Sani polled 227 votes, and Al-Hassan Adams polled 157 votes. No rejected votes. 384 people cast the votes.
United we stand, divided we fall. I'm opening my doors to call on whoever. There's no loser, there's no winner. We have all won. And this
Now, there was near violence at the National Democratic Congress's election in Tamale after one of the contestants rejected the results, citing irregularities. His supporters tried to go through the barricade that was mounted to secure the counting area, forcing the Electoral Commission to halt the entire process. Northern Region's Martina Bugri has the rest of the details.
The elections ended peacefully and the counting process completed, with only the declaration to be made.
61, 62, 63, 64, 65, 66.
Whilst the EC was preparing to declare, supporters of Wumbe Godfrey started jubilating. But it was cut short when supporters of Ali Adolf also started jubilating. At this point, Wumbe Godfrey began protesting that he had won and was being cheated out. Mr. Wumbe questioned why he had not been given the certified results.
I will never come for the job. This is a rigged election. This is a rigged election. My big satisfied pictures are not here. Everybody has the satisfied picture. They haven't given you my best satisfied picture.
Meanwhile, in the midst of this, the Electoral Commission declared Ali Adolf John as Northern Regional Chairman-elect. Whilst the vice chairmanship position went to Ahmed Al-Hassan and Abdul Mumin Husseini, the incumbent secretary, Mohammed Abdul Salam, retained his seat, whilst the deputy secretary, Zeblim Saka, also retained his seat. The organizer, Abubakar Abdullahi, also picked back his slot. The organizer, Abubakar Abdullahi, took back his position. The rest of the winners are Mohammed Zeshos, who beat 5 other contestants to pick up the deputy organizer position, while treasurer position went to Hajia Shamima, deputy treasurer Suhini Yalana, and communications Suleimana Mahamadu, deputy communications Abdullah Abu Sofyan, and Zongo Caucus Ajia Jamila Amadou.
Now, wrapping up, a plant breeder with the Savannah Accelerated Research Institute, Richard Otenfrempon, is advocating that more farmers be given access to improved seed varieties produced by SARI and the Accelerated Variety Improvement and Seed Delivery of Legumes and Cereals in Africa. He says most of the seed companies are interested in producing more maize hybrids because legumes are rather bulky, making transportation very difficult. Another report by Martina Bugri.
Speaking at a workshop organized by Avisa in collaboration with SARI for stakeholders in the agricultural sector, the plant breeder said the objective of SARI and Avisa is to make the new seed variety accessible to farmers at the local level.
What we have is that most of the seed companies are more interested in doing the hybrids, and so they are doing a lot of the maize in the country. So important crops like the legumes that we have, like groundnut and cowpea, the seed system is not that well developed, and basically is because the market there is not that well developed for the farmers. However, we believe that these farmers should have access to this improved varieties, seeds of these improved varieties. And so our objective here is trying to come up with a model that will work out for the farmers.
Project lead for Avisa, Chris Oju, said Avisa is concerned about the constraint experienced by farmers and post-farm value chain actors to add new variety to their portfolio.
Project Avisa is accelerated variety improvement and seed systems for sorghum, cereals and legumes in Africa. We're looking at the seed systems. Seed systems is critical here because, as you all know, without seeds, all the good work that the breeders do or the researchers do cannot reach the farmers. So seed is the vehicle that carries the good technologies that are done by the researchers. Importantly, also I would say that seed is the backbone of agriculture, because without seed, everything else doesn't work. Even if you have fertilizers don't germinate. We are doing very good research, good partnership with SARI in Ghana. Lots of varieties being released. We've just been told that recently we have 2 new groundnut varieties, we have 7 new cowpea varieties, and definitely there could be more released in the previous years, very recent years. A big question is not the number of varieties released. The question is the number of those good varieties in the farmers' hands and in the rest of the other stakeholders' hands. So that's why we have brought in multiple stakeholders to answer some of the very basic and very important questions about variety adoption.
Here's where we wrap up. Finally, on the bulletin. For more, log on to www.myjoyonline.com. My name is Pakwesi Shandoff. The show continues with Benjamin Akakpo and Mapito CBD. Stay.
Welcome back on the AM show. Mapito, Benjamin, we're here and ready to go. We're about to serve them the newspapers, right?
We
and
are.
what they're saying.
But you know that it's a 3-host show. So
yes.
It's Mapito CBD, Benjamin Akakpo, and Bernice Abubedu Lansa.
Yeah, they'll be seeing Bernice. They know the drill.
Yeah.
Bernice will be coming in later when we bring in the big stories. But definitely a lot of big stories from the papers this morning. But like I always like doing, I like to find out. So we had the GJA Awards, and then we also had quite a situation. We've heard that fuel prices are set to go down. Others say it's going to stabilize and all of that. What's your situation like? When you purchased fuel, did you purchase fuel over the weekend?
I did. So 800 cedis lasted me a week and a week and a half.
A week and a half?
Yes, and that's...
Are you using a 1.6 litre engine?
Yes, but this is why.
Okay, I'm surprised.
I was going home, work, gym. I wasn't going to any other places. So it was work, home, and the gym was only like 3 times a week.
Okay.
And because I live so close to the office, it wasn't really, strenuous. And
that
also,
explains it.
I wasn't, because I come to work at dawn, I don't switch on my AC. I only use my AC when I'm going to the house, which is like 10, 15 minutes max journey. So that is why it lasted so long.
So here's what I'm picking.
Yeah.
You're rationing stuff.
Yes.
You're rationing your AC. And I do it unashamedly. You know, sometimes when I'm in there, and sometimes because of the time I'm leaving, it's blazing hot.
Yeah.
You know, so you turn it on, not full throttle, maybe to 2. It chills for a while, then Charlie, I either turn to 1 or switch off.
So I was talking to Mbora about that, one of our colleagues, right? And he does the drive safe. What was it?
Drive safe.
Drive safe. Yeah, he does the drive safe, and he's speaking to some, engineers and car dealers and whatnot, and people who know about this transport thing and car thing. And he was saying that this whole thing of like what you're doing, put your AC on 2, put it on 1, and switch it off. It takes even more power or more fuel because
every time you turn it on,
it has to, pump up.
But I usually, I just switch from 2 to 1. You can't also lose sight of the fact that when it's on 4 or 3, it's consuming more energy than when it's on 2.
Yeah.
So definitely. Turning it on or off, yes, I agree with that. But switching from a higher to a lower, it's okay.
It's okay.
But let me find out whether maybe Suleiman Abraham, Executive Director, Media Foundation for West Africa, is doing same, since now we're all not ball watching, we're needle watching.
Yeah.
Where's my fuel gauge?
What's happening? What's going on?
I think nowadays when we meet, we should do this. Everybody will understand. Mr. Brahma, very good morning to you.
Good morning, Ben.
Good morning, Mr. Brahma.
Good morning, Mapito. Is that right?
Maps.
Maps will do.
That makes it so easy.
Yeah.
Great.
Okay. So I was trying to find out, Mr. Brahma, whether you've fallen prey to that temptation as well, to watch the needle of your fuel gauge, and also if you try to regulate your AC so that you can conserve energy. Just quickly on a lighter note, and then we'll get into the papers.
Well, at this stage, we all have to do. To be honest, I really hardly put on my air conditioner because really it's tough. We're talking about, almost like 20 cedis per liter. And certainly that is not an easy thing to endure. Quite often I would leave a bit earlier, which makes the weather okay to drive without the air condition. And coming back home a bit late is also sometimes better, unless for one reason or the other, maybe I have to make a call and I need the surroundings to be a bit quiet. That's the only time perhaps I would put on my air conditioner. As you know, at this stage, really, we have air condition. So.
Okay, that's an interesting note on which to start. Ohiampe air condition, because okay, you will leave it there. Let's get into the papers, Mapito.
Let's get into the papers, and I'll start with Daily Graphic. And the big story is that, so as we know that we had the Ghana Journalists Association Awards over the weekend, and rise above partisanship, the NMC chair charges media. So the chairman of the National Media Commission, Yao Boedu, has urged the media to rise above partisanship. Woo. It's been a long weekend. And collectively fight national causes to remain impactful and serve their purpose in society. He said it is time for journalists to fight for systems and institutions to work effectively instead of blaming governments and regimes. Mr. Brady gave the advice at the 26th award ceremony of the Ghana Journalists Association. He also said that journalists were recognized and appreciated, not because they were more human than others, but because they were supposed to be the voice of the voiceless and fight for those who had no means of fighting. He said, and I quote, "Journalists are therefore expected to use this unique role to tackle a national failure and not a regime. We have to look at issues from a national perspective and not through a partisan lens." He also spoke about Ahmed Swale, and he said, "Whoever killed the journalist Ahmed Swale does not deserve to walk about freely or live, but there are many other victims whose families also deserve justice but have had no voice to make that call." There has not been a headway in unraveling the gruesome murder of Swale and also Samuel Enin, the former Ashanti Regional Chairman of the GGA, who was murdered in 2007. We also have position yourselves to benefit from the 20 billion climate fund. That's according to Jinapo, who's telling developing countries. And we also have venture capital supports SMEs with 1.5 billion Ghana cedis. Mr. Brahma, let's talk about the advice from the NMC chair charges. Okay, he's working on his Zoom. We'll get to him. But we also know that the Bank of Ghana denies financing government 70 billion Ghana cedis. Benjamin, rise above partisanship. Yeah.
I don't think anyone in this country who wishes well for our country should even be told that.
Yeah.
We don't need to be told that. I think it is a great point that anyone who is patriotic should rise above citizenship.
Yeah.
But at the same time, citizenship, we ought to find out what kind, what ilk, what type of citizenship we're looking at, because Mr. President said, for example, at his inauguration, don't be spectators, be citizens. Yet there are things that have been done where people felt they were being citizens and they've been victimized.
Yeah.
So what kind of citizenship exactly are we calling for? And I do agree with the general thought that we should rise above politics and be citizens. But we also can't lose sight of the fact that our politics is so ingrained, that like some people will say, even if you picked a donkey or a goat and put some party colors around their necks, people would vote for those goats and donkeys. That's pathetic where we've got to, and we ought to be able to rise above that. But I must say that in the Fourth Republic, if you look at the inception of the Fourth Republic and where we've come to and how people think and the voting patterns and voting skirt and blouse and all of that, you'd realize that we are slowly but surely getting there. And that's a very positive step.
All right, let's also do some other stories. Let's go to page 13. 18 million people do not have access to hand washing facilities. You know, during COVID, I mean, the main thing was that you have to wash your hands under running water with soap. And 18 million people do not have access to hand washing facilities. And you look at it and like, okay, you know what? It's a good thing that COVID didn't hit us like it did with other countries, because we don't have the facilities. But this represents about 58% of households in the country. That's according to UNICEF Ghana. To achieve universal access to hand washing facilities by 2030, UNICEF said more than 11,365 hand washing facilities were needed on a weekly basis. 18 million people. Benjamin, do you have any thoughts on that?
I mean, this feeds into the sanitation situation. We've had some of these wash institutions in the country for a long time. We know about the problem we have with open defecation.
Yeah.
We know about the problem we have with lots of homes not having toilets, facilities and all of that. I mean, at this point, I really don't know. Our system is broken. And if you look at what we spend every year on open defecation, if you look at the gap when it comes to water resources, potable water and the rest, you just ask yourself when exactly we're going to sit up and tackle these issues. And, well, maybe it's also definitely at the doorstep of the Minister for Sanitation and Water Resources, Cecilia Abna Dapa. I mean, there's more that can be done in that direction. Oh, and speaking of which, you remember the promise that Accra would be the cleanest city in Africa?
Yeah.
It's under her, you know, was it sometime last year
who
or 2
made the
years
promise
ago?
Again?
Who did what?
Who made the promise?
Oh, Mr. President.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo.
Oh, okay.
You know, the last time I checked, I even brought it up in my blunt thoughts for Friday. Last time I checked, Accra wasn't even in the top 10 of the cleanest cities in Africa. Not even in the top 10. I mean, Kumasi does better in some of the lists. You would see the Garden City, Kumasi popping up. But Accra, I'm yet to see Accra. I'm still looking for Accra.
Okay. But he said at the end of his term.
That was the first term.
Okay. Did he say first term? He didn't say first term. He said at the end of
If
of
I
my
recall.
Okay.
The suggestion was that within that first term, he would do it. Now we're 6 years into it.
Okay. I was trying to, you know.
don't mitigate.
Yeah,
don't
you know.
Control.
Because his second term is not over. So I was trying to say that, you know, at least second term is not over, so we can see Accra being the cleanest city in
I mean, it would be a good thing to see. It would be a good thing. You go to some parts of Accra and your heart will bleed.
Chale, and I always go back to attitude. Attitude is like, it's terrible. You'll see someone in a Trotsky will eat the yogurt, bowl fruit. When they're done, they just throw it out of the window. And then tomorrow, that same person will be, complaining that, oh, my thing is flooded, or around my house is flooded, the area in my, in my neighborhood or whatever.
You make a very important point. Look at our beaches.
Yeah.
Look at our beaches. The filth in
it's terrible.
Around some of them. You even go to Labadi, the main beach, and sometimes you have to avoid so many things. When I went to Lomé recently, usually when you go through the border and you're going the stretch of beach, it's always pretty neat. But I think maybe, and that's why I feel our leaders are not stern enough, because no one ever develops a country with a very wishy-washy attitude. In Singapore, when they started with Lee Kuan Yew, and people can have whatever they want to think or say about Lee Kuan Yew, but if you did some things, right, you would get flogged. They would catch you and deal with you. I think, look, sometimes that's simply the way to go. You create it's a paradigm shift, and those who now come up will come to live it out, and that's how you create a different system.
Yeah.
But with the same old people doing the same old things, you'll get the same old results.
Same old results. Mr. Brimer, do we have Mr. Brimer?
Yes.
All right, so rise above partisanship, and that's according to the chairman of the National Media Commission. He has urged the media to rise above partisanship and collectively fight national causes to remain impactful and serve their purposes. or their purpose in society. Your thoughts on that?
Well, let me start by saying that it was certainly a great event. Congratulations to the GJA for organizing the event. And of course, even much more congratulations to our colleague journalists who picked up awards at the event. Certainly, our country needs a great journalism now than ever before, given the circumstances that we are in. And I do agree with the the NMC chairman that we certainly have to move above partisanship and do the kind of journalism that our constitution envisaged that we would do, which is to hold duty bearers accountable. It's also important to therefore emphasize that at any point in time, we have a government in place, and that government has to at all times be held accountable. And I don't want to believe that holding the government accountable would amount to an act of partisanship, because I think sometimes it's difficult to understand what people's perspectives are. The people who say, well, journalism must do great work are the same people sometimes who say, oh, if you are taking on the government too much, you need to focus on both sides. But at all times, we have one government in place, and that government must be held accountable to the people of Ghana as mandated by the Constitution. So yes, we have to move about partisanship, but we have to continue to play that cardinal role of holding the government of the day accountable, of course, while not overlooking any excesses on the part of the opposition and other actors within our society.
Yeah. Ben?
Let me get into other papers now. And the Ghanaian Times newspaper, it has quite a number of stories. Starts with Portia Gabo receiving her award from Ms. Obushi Sai Kofi. Portia Gabo named 2021 Journalist of the Year. There's also CRI, that is Child Rights International, drags 3 teacher unions to court over strike. Then there's a GJA Awards night tied to that. Support economic recovery plans. President tasks journalists. And then Jinaport John Kerry co-chair first ministerial meeting of Forest Climate Leaders Partnership. And then 3 Chinese grabbed for allegedly murdering man at mining site. Let me start with the call on journalists. Let me start from there. Mm-hmm. So media practitioners in the country have been urged to work with government towards alleviating the current economic challenges that threaten the livelihoods of Ghanaians. According to President Akufo-Addo, the current economic situation required the involvement of all stakeholders to ensure interventions introduced by government to restore economic recovery become successful. To this end, he reiterated the government's commitment to promoting press freedom to enable journalists to play their critical role as gatekeepers of society. He also added, quote, all hands must be on deck to battle economic challenges that threaten our livelihood. The media, which is a critical arm of our democracy, has a crucial role in supporting efforts to restore economic normalcy. That's what Akufo-Addo said. Of course, we all should know that tied to that, Portia Gabo of TV3 in Accra has been adjudged Journalist of the Year 2021 at this year's Ghana Journalists Association Awards. She was also named the best in television news reporting and best in health reporting. The event, which was held on Saturday with the theme Walking the Path Towards Ghana's Economic Recovery, the Role of the Media, also saw Emmanuel Karanting, we all call him Manuel, of JoyNews, and Francisca Enchel of Joy Prime, or freelancer as well, winning Most Promising Journalist and Female Journalist of the Year, respectively. In fact, a number of our colleagues also bagged awards. We bagged 8 of them. And a friend of mine, Ridwan Karim Osman of EIB Network, won Best in News Reporting on Radio, while Pegiama Donko took home the Best in Features for TV. But what's your quick reaction to the president's call? And some have said that our own media practice or media freedoms are a bit suspect right now. What's your understanding of the situation, Mr. Brima?
Well, we hear the president, and it's a good call. Of course, we all know that we are in crisis now, and every stakeholder, every institution has a role to play. It's quite sad that we are in this, and the president is refusing to listen to all actors within our society who have said, look, it's time for you to take certain actions, such as reduce the size of your government, the finance minister has performed abysmally and must be removed. Realign certain policies that have proven to be a waste in the system. Cut down on the number of specialized agencies that have been set up that basically are fleecing the state in terms of our resources and all of that. The president is listening to none of that and is not taking any action. So far, in the midst of all this crisis, the president has not taken any action that suggests, or is related to a leader who wants to adopt any mitigation measures. So we listen or we hear him on the issue of economic crisis, which we all know. And I believe that we are suffering more than he is because our taxes is taking care of him in a luxurious manner. And so, yeah, it's we who are the ones who are suffering. And he must begin to listen to us. Talking about press freedom, yes, it's one thing saying that, look, the press must be free, we support press freedom and all of that. And another thing, really taking action. The Swallow incident, for example, what has been the commitment of the government so far? Any serious government would have been pushing to ensure that the investigative bodies are doing what they have to do. So far, it's been quiet. It's a matter that very soon we may be filing a case at the ECOWAS court against the government of Ghana, because elsewhere in the region, the ECOWAS court has made decisions against certain governments that have basically played aloof on matters like this. And so we hear the president, but we need to see a lot of action than words.
I think sometimes perception feeds into it a lot. Very quickly, Mr. Brima, because you know what, Mapito and Mr. Brima, throughout all my years of media practice, I've never had people as concerned about me, okay, asking, hey, this thing you're doing, and blah, 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 are you okay? Are you safe? My priests ask me, are you safe? Are you getting any threats? Are you this and that? And I've never, in the course of all the time I have done media, had people focus on me and ask, are you safe? And that also feeds into what then they are thinking about the system. Yeah. Do you get it? Yeah. I've never had a chunk of people, practically every week. My own mom often is asking, are you safe? So this whole Ahmed Hussein Swale situation, it's bigger than when we leave these matters unresolved. It's far bigger. It's far bigger. I don't know whether you have any quick reactions to that, Mr. Brima.
No, absolutely. We are certainly in times that journalist safety is really at stake. And what you experience, and you are not alone, we all go through that. Parents calling you to say you need to be careful. The system is not too good. Please, you are not the only one who will build Ghana. And sometimes you have to be quiet over certain issues. It's real. And I, given the work that I do, I have had several journalists calling me, either a story that they are pursuing that they've been compelled to drop, or a story that they are doing that they feel their safety could be compromised, or seeking an opinion whether they should go on with this because they don't feel so safe. It's real, and for me, that is what was reflected in our ranking. The last time the ranking was done, dropping from the 30th position in the world to the 60th, and from the 3rd to the 10th in Africa. I think that when it comes to press freedom, over the last 2 decades or so, this government appears to be the worst. They talk the most, but they act the least.
Right. Yeah. Anyway, so let's do the story. CRI drags 3 teacher unions to court over strike, and a civil society organization, Child Rights International, has dragged 3 teacher unions to the Supreme Court over an industrial action. It is making a case that the strike by the 3 unions is unconstitutional and a violation of the rights of students to education as enshrined in Articles 25, 28, as well of the 1992 Constitution. Let's get into some other stories.
All right, let's go to Republic Press and bishops mad at government. We also have the EC warns the PNC to resolve internal wrangling or face permanent suspension. And on page 8, reduce the number of convoys, that is the Catholic bishops, to President Akufo-Addo. Still on page 8, 14,000 Ghanaians die of HIV/AIDS annually. Page 3, AICC makes a U-turn over Anas Galamsey video. But let's get to the big story where the bishops are mad at the government, and they say that the Catholic Bishops' Conference has taken a swipe at the government and the various security agencies of alleged widespread nepotism and corruption in the country, especially during the recruitment process of the agencies. According to Most Reverend Philip Name, who doubles as the Metropolitan Archbishop of Tamale, the various security agencies are now replete with corrupt tendencies to the extent that many qualified Ghanaians can no longer be recruited on their merits without relying on the benevolence of those in power. So that is the big story. But we also have reduced the number of convoys, the Catholic bishops, to President Akufo-Addo. I mean, we've also heard various institutions saying that the
Christian Council of Ghana, for example, has had its own take on some of these issues, including Galamsey, among others.
Including the size of the government. And the Ghana Catholic Bishops' Conference has asked the government to cut down on economic costs by reducing the leadership of state-owned enterprises. The size of government and leadership of state-owned enterprises should be significantly reduced. One strong signal that will indicate leadership is committed to burden sharing is by reducing the size of presidential convoys. The conference also called for an aggressive approach to the recommendations of the Auditor General, as often captured in his reports every year. So the bishops are mad at government. They say that first there is corruption, nepotism, and third, they want President Akufo-Addo to reduce the size of his government, and also reduce the number of convoys. We also have 14,000 Ghanaians die of HIV/AIDS annually on page 8. Take a quick look at that. The three bodies, Ghana HIV and AIDS Network of persons living with HIV, and the civil society organizations and health, have made this appeal that, according to the group, this has become necessary because the Global Fund, which has been the single largest donor of the national HIV and AIDS response since 2002, have threatened to cut back on their support. So basically, they're calling for support and for funds for them to continue doing their work, because they say that 14,000 Ghanaians die of HIV/AIDS annually, and these 14,000 are the 14,000 that we are aware of, the ones that have gone to test, the ones that are getting their medication, or some are testing but have decided not to take their ARVs. Mr. Brahma, quickly, bishops mad at government and also reduce the number of convoys. That's according to that's what the Catholic bishops are asking President Akufo-Addo. Thoughts?
Well, so far, a lot of calls. Civil society organizations have spoken. The president has refused to listen. Members in the opposition in parliament have spoken. The president has refused to listen. His own members of parliament have spoken. He has refused to listen. Trade Union Congress has spoken. He's refusing. Now the Catholic Bishops' Conference has spoken. I can only hope that, given that we had a president who was more committed to building a cathedral than dealing with the crisis faced by our children who are studying under trees, studying without chairs and all of that, he would consider the voice of the Catholic bishops as the voice of God. And even as the building of the cathedral is in limbo, at least he will listen to the voice of God, which has been passed on through the Catholic Bishops' Conference. So let's pray. Let's all pray that at least the voice of God through the Catholic Bishops' Conference would this time touch our president to act in line with the crisis that we are in. Otherwise, I think that the president's inaction is even more a crisis than the economic turbulence that we face. So let's all pray that our president would, going forward, listen, so that at least our situation can be improved a little bit better.
All right. Also, on a somewhat lighter note, talking about the economic hardship, you and I are feeling the pinch. I'm sure, Mr. Brahma, you're also feeling the pinch. But someone who says they're not feeling the pinch is gospel musician Dinah Asamoah. She says that she's not feeling the pinch. In an interview with Sammy K, the gospel musician indicated that she has only heard of the cries of hardship by many Ghanaians in the country, but she has not experienced it. She says that God is taking care of her, and if you trust in God, anything that is happening in the world will not touch you.
Well, Mapito, good for her.
Good for her.
And we pray that her God keeps taking care of her. Maybe our God is different, maybe. But we pray that Diana Samuel's God keeps taking care of her.
Amen.
Yeah.
Yeah. What do you have?
Let me get into the Finder newspaper, and some of the stories have already, in fact, all of those on the front page have already been elaborated upon, so I'll skip them. Apart from, of course, EcoBank deepens financial literacy to drive inclusion. That story is on page 8. You can check it out. But quickly, Mr. Brima, 25 billion Ghana cedis used to finance government's debt, not 70 billion Ghana cedis. You remember the Bolga Central MP Isaac Adongo brought up this issue. The Bank of Ghana's governor is saying it was 25 billion Ghana cedis used and not 70 billion. There's also General Legal Counsel to withdraw the accreditation of some schools offering LLB courses. And the Chief Justice, Kwesi Anene-Yeboah, says the General Legal Counsel will soon withdraw the recognition of some institutions offering LLB programs to sanitize, because the word that is used here, sanctify, is a bit the legal profession. And this is because the institutions lacked lecturers, lecture rooms, and libraries. He was speaking at the enrollment of 846 newly qualified lawyers on Friday at the Accra International Conference Center. Then 2 more stories to add, so you can choose which ones to reflect on. Policeman who freed convict in exchange for trip abroad, jailed 12 years. I'm sure you followed that story. And an Accra Circuit Court, I beg your pardon, has sentenced the police officer to 12 years imprisonment for assisting ex-convict Harold Davis Johnson to travel abroad without serving his jail term at the Nsawam prisons. And finally, I want you to react to this one. Patrons elated about affordable foodstuff prices at Pilot Planting for Food and Jobs Market. We went on the field. We had some people saying, but your prices are even more expensive than in other markets. But others also said, no, this is good to go. Some have asked about sustainability, and I just want to add this point. I think it was under one administration, I think it was the Rawlings administration, part 1, when they had a similar enterprise. It took 2 weeks and they stopped. They folded up. So some have asked about the practicality of this. Quick reactions, Suleimana.
No, I think this sale of food at the Agric Ministry or by the Agric Ministry is the clearest evidence of the failure of that ministry and that minister. I've always made the point that one of the major failures under the Akufo-Addo regime has been in the Agric sector. And I mean, it's also significantly been the sector that has gotten a lot of money allocated, and whether the monies were actually being used for whatever they were intended is something that we can all later discuss. But Agric has been the one area that we fail, because if the Agric sector was doing well, whether COVID-19 or Russia, Ukraine, or the Queen's death, or whatever it is, I'm sure food prices wouldn't have been going the way they've gone. And to say that you want to prove that food can be sold at a cheaper price by bringing food from whatever, look, the reality is that how much is being paid for transport by the ministry? Is the transport seeking, the ministry seeking to make profit? So if I were to go and buy plantain as a trader from Kumasi or from Tepa or Goso, and then bring it to Accra, you expect that if I bought it at 20 cedis, I should sell it at 20 cedis? No, because I'm into business, and maybe I'll sell it at 22 cedis or 24 cedis. But the ministry's action, which for me is pure propaganda, the ministry can buy food there at 20 cedis, bring it here to sell it at even the same 20 cedis or even less. Now, if this is the policy of the government, are we going to see the Ministry of Fisheries also beginning to sell fish at the ministry? And are we going to see the other ministries doing the same? The Ministry of Trade beginning to import stuff so that we go there to get what we need. It's just a clear evidence of failure on the part of government and these individual ministries. And so the earlier we do the right things, the better than all these gimmicks.
Let me just sneak this by you in some 20 seconds, if you may. The Minister for works in housing, Francis Asenso-Boakye, is saying that government is exploring the possibility of selling the Saglemi housing project, covering the 1,506 housing units, to a private sector entity to complete and sell at no further cost to the state. He notes that the proceeds from the sale will come to the state and be reinvested into government's affordable housing program. I passed by that stretch just about 3 weeks ago, and again, I felt a pinch, when I passed by that stretch. Here we are saying we want to give to a private developer, complete it, sell it, we'll get our share, or we'll get whatever, and then we'll reinvest it into affordable housing. Affordable housing has never worked in this country. Quick take?
Well, it's politics as usual. I am wondering why they have had to, close to 6 years, those units have been sitting there, getting rotten. Yes, I know they say they are prosecuting a former minister over whatever it is, but I doubt that prevented us from acting to put those houses into use. So going forward, I just hope that, for me, the most important thing is that, look, so much money has been pumped into that facility, and allowing it to rot for the sake of politics is certainly not something that is good for our country. The whole culture of abandoning projects that were started by previous governments is something that is quite depressing. As recently, if you remember, we did a national report looking at these facilities, and the report was titled "Billions in the Bush," and it's something that appears a dent on our national conscience, and I don't know why and when we would have a leader who would try to do the right thing and move above these pettiness.
All right then, Mr. Suleiman Ibrahima, thank you so much for your time. It's always a pleasure doing this with you. Benjamin, some exciting things happened in the world of sports over the weekend.
Well, talking of excitement, what I heard wasn't so exciting. Do you know our first 2 goalkeepers for the Black Stars?
Okay, well,
are injured?
In Ghana, yeah, it's never exciting in the world of sports. You people are just joking with the sports. Yeah.
How are we joking with the sports?
Yeah.
But anyway, so Jojo Wallacott has a finger injury, a fracture of sorts. Mm-hmm. There's also the second goalkeeper, Ofori, who has an issue. Mm-hmm. And now we hear that the Asante Kotoko, goalie actually had to quickly find himself in Abu Dhabi, if you like. But there's also that issue about Cristiano Ronaldo and Ten Hag. Apparently, there has been quite a tussle. Ten Hag, the Manchester United manager, has not played him often. And apparently there's talk about some disrespect going on from the player to the manager. All of that coming up in sports. Do stay. It's Prime Take with Anthony Bafo.
Good morning. Welcome to AM Sports here with me, Muftau Nabila Abdullah. Later today, Black Stars head coach Otto Addo will be announcing his final squad for the FIFA World Cup to be staged in Qatar later this month. That tournament will start on Sunday. Well, one person who played a crucial role in convincing Otto Addo to accept the role of Black Stars head coach is Anthony Bafo, and he's been speaking on Prime Take. According to him, it was the president of the Ghana Football Association, Kurt Okreku, who needed Otto Addo badly.
I must say, first of all, it's Kurt Okreku who wanted Otto.
The GFA president?
Yes, by all means. What I did was just to support him in traveling to Germany. And you also know my links in Germany with the management of Borussia Dortmund. Somebody like Michael Zorc, who was the sporting director, but he retired. Then you have Sebastian Kehl, even Edwin, the coach. At that time, he was a technical director. Yeah. So there was a relationship, and so when the President Kurt asked me to accompany him and support him, I said, yes, of course, I'll do it. It's for Ghana too. And yeah, that's what I did. But he was the one who wanted Otto. He was going all out to get Otto.
Was it difficult convincing Otto to accept the job?
I don't think it was so difficult, but the circumstances around him being on the contract with Dortmund, then having the qualifiers, and then see the next step when you qualify to go to the World Cup. But I think at that time, every league will be on hold. Yeah, so now Otto is the coach, together with his technical team, George Watton, Chris Hutton, and Masoud Didi Dramani, and other members. So we're looking forward to the World Cup, and very soon, I think.
The next couple of days.
Pardon?
In the next couple of days.
Yes.
We'll be watching Otto on the touchline. How?
No, in the next couple of days, you will have the final 26 also coming up.
Yeah. Black Stars also, about 2 months ago, played some preparatory matches against Brazil and Nicaragua. Questions had surrounded how much the Ghana Football Association and the Ministry of Youth and Sports spent on those two final matches. Well, the Minister of Youth and Sports, Mustafa Yusuf, has revealed that Brazil paid Ghana $90,000 for the friendly match in September. The funds spent on the match, in addition to the Nicaragua game, was reported to be about $800,000, a figure that GFA categorically dismissed. Speaking in an interview on Joy Sports Link, Sports Minister Mustafa Yusuf said Ghana rather gained from the friendly match.
What nations FIFA does is that once nations have qualified for tournaments like the World Cup, especially because not all the FIFA tournament gets preparation funds.
Sure.
But once you qualify for World Cup, the Men's World Cup, FIFA gives $1.5 million to the FAs to prepare the team. So the FA put a budget together for all the 3 matches. That is the
Brazil,
Nicaragua, and Switzerland. So the budget covers all the preparation by way of flights, the accommodation, everything.
Okay.
Till we get to the Doha.
Okay.
So that is, but so far, because we have not yet finished, because we still have one outstanding friendly to play, we still have to camp there as part of the preparation. I cannot just give you the actual expenditure. But
what I was asking was, because normally teams like Brazil, they have what they call the Brazil Global Tour. You know, it's a big deal. And sometimes we know that when they are going to the World Cup, they would invite a certain nation because obviously in their group there's Cameroon. So they needed an African opposition and so on. So let me ask another way. Did Brazil pay us?
Yes, per the agreement I've cited, Brazil paid the FA $90,000 for the friendly match.
Okay,
yes,
so
they did.
Everything was paid for.
Everything was paid for, but
and then some money.
Because we could have gotten more.
Okay,
but because it was very short, Brazil had a lot of other African nations to play.
Sure.
And this was on a short notice.
Okay.
And because it was on a short notice, it's either you take it or you leave.
Okay.
And Ghana too needed the game.
Thank you for staying with us. We get into our very first big story. And today we have a conversation, a very important one, with government statistician, Professor Samuel Kobina Enim. We're talking about the Consumer Price Index and inflation. What do they mean to you? How are they reflecting on you? The October figure for inflation stood at 40.4%. We're also discussing annual household income and expenditure statistics, as well as what the Ghana Statistical Service can do to help solve food security matters in Ghana. Well, joining us for that conversation is the government statistician himself, Professor Samuel Kobina Enim. I love it when I pronounce his name. His name has some swag. Kobina Enim. A very good morning to you, sir.
Good morning,
Thanks
Ben.
for joining us once more.
Thank you for having me on the show.
We're very grateful, privileged that every time we call on you, you make the time to join us. Thank you so much.
It's always a pleasure.
Great. There's a whole lot to talk to you about this morning. Of course, there's that all-important matter of the statistical week across Africa and what we're going to be doing here in Ghana as well. But let's start the conversation from what many people want to talk about right now, the inflationary rate. And there are so many conceptions and misconceptions out there. So I'd like to start off the conversation by finding out from you, Prof. What goes into pegging Ghana's inflationary rate at what given time? What goes into the basket? How many items are there? Do you strike an average after? What is it like? Just give us a bird's eye view of what you do.
Thank you, Ben. As I indicated, it's a pleasure being on the show for two reasons. One is our drive at the service to make Ghana a statistics-driven country. And these conversations helps us to move away from the headline figure, which is 40.4,
right,
and begin to ask questions on how it was computed,
right,
what the implications are. Let me begin by saying that at Ghana Statistical Service, we don't peg the inflation rate. If you use the word peg, it's synonymous to what the central bank does in terms of having an inflation target.
Right.
So what we do at Ghana Statistical Service, we refer to it as a reality of what is happening on the ground. So we compute the rate of inflation using the consumer price index approach. And it's always important to keep in mind that it's a relative measure. And what that means is that you are comparing what is happening now with what happened either last month or what happened at the same time last year. So anytime we talk about the 40.4, you need to keep in mind that we are saying 40.4 relative to what happened in October 2021. Somebody can decide to change the reference period and say that, let me look at changes in prices in the last 6 months, changes in prices in the last 12 months. But we at Ghana Statistical Service, we do the disaggregation either on month-on-month basis or on a year-on-year basis. It is not prices, it is changes in prices. And what we mean by that is, anytime we do a living standard survey, we collect data on frequently consumed items and less frequently consumed items from households. So based on this, we allocate the importance that people attach to different commodities. So currently we have 307 items in the basket. And when we are computing inflation, the three variables that we use for the computation are the weight, that is the importance that Ghanaians put on different items, the prices, and the quantities. Let me give you a typical
So weight, prices, and quantities. Just a quick one. So when you're talking about the weighting, for example, we consume a lot of rice in this country. Is that what you're referring to?
Yes.
So the importance to maybe,
exactly.
Is it a staple?
Exactly. So if you take the 307 items, all of them have weights, and if you put all of them together, it should give you 100%, because we want to look at the relativity. And the item that has the highest weight in our basket is bars and trotro fares, which has a weight of about 5.29, almost 5.3.
Does that explain why we've seen practically for the last few months, it's always one of the top figures impacting, the general inflationary rate?
Indeed, in October, we saw diesel showing the highest price change of 155.6, followed by petrol showing a change that is a year-on-year change of 111.9%. Relative to their weight, petrol has a higher weight of 1.4 than diesel with a weight of 0.2, because most people are on petrol. But what we always talk about as statistical services, for you to think about what the terminology pass-through effects. So if you take changes in diesel, changes in petrol, what we mean by the pass-through effect is what is going to happen to bus and trotro fares.
Right.
So you are not going to see the impact only on the change in the price of petrol, but you're going to see that trickling down effect on other items in the basket. But immediately we calculate inflation for that particular month, we are picking the effect of the changes in that price for that particular month. But subsequently, it's going to have a rippling effect because of the terminology, the pass-through effect.
Right.
So we have 307 items that we have in the basket. And I want to emphasize the fact that we all have different experiences with inflation, given our basket. So if you go into the 307 items, then you're going to select certain items relative to your lifestyle.
Right.
I'm going to select certain items relative to my lifestyle. Right. So all of us are experiencing different effects of the inflation depending on the item that we have in the basket. And we are taking advantage of the African Statistics Week. And on Wednesday, we're going to do an exhibition at the Accra International Conference Center, where people will come in, they will tell us their basket, and we're going to calculate their different inflation rates for them. Indeed, we've reached an advanced stage where we're going to have an app on our website, which is going to be called the Personal Inflation Calculator. So if you go in
Wow,
there,
okay.
you're going to select your items, and you would realize that we have different experiences with inflation. But at the national level, for policy purposes, it is important we average our different experiences so that we can get a national figure. That is why nationally it's an average of 40.4, but given our different experience, given the different items in the basket that we're going to choose, we're going to have different inflation rates.
So that's interesting. I mean, definitely the point you made about each one of us having personalized inflation makes sense. And it's something that even without being a statistician, some people would have come to realize by now. Because if there's someone who is buying, and I'm going to mention some brands, the Horlicks and the cereals and all of that, you look at the prices and the way they've escalated. A lot, in fact, all of these are imported. So, you know, of course, we are looking at homegrown inflation and imported inflation. And at least though homegrown inflation is catching up, imported inflation is higher. So you would look at that and see that, okay, person X would definitely have a higher inflation than someone who is buying the ordinary plantain and the rest on the market. And it also makes sense then, because some of these are our staples, the rice, the oil, and some of the basic chicken. So you would see that that effect will definitely, you know, trickle down the system. But having said that, this personal inflation calculator, you're saying it's going to be open to everybody?
Yeah.
Not just those who will come to the Accra International Conference Center?
I mean, on Wednesday, we're going to do a demonstration of it, but moving forward, we're going to have it as an app on our website. So you go in there and you select your basket and you see how your inflation compares with the national figure.
So you're telling me basically that while we stand in October at 40.4%, I could key in. So I'm purchasing petrol. Maybe someone is not driving, so the person isn't purchasing that. So that will be off the person's list. But then transport fares will come in. So that person will put it in for transport fares. I will put in for someone who is purchasing petrol and all of that.
Yeah.
And technically, my inflation could be, say, 100%. While nationally, it is 40.4%. My personal inflation could be about even 200%.
Correct.
Depending on what I go for.
Correct. Absolutely. And somebody would have an inflation rate of 1%, depending on what the person is consuming. And what we do nationally is to strike the average.
Let's look at that average that you speak of. Regionally, when you look at the regional breakdown of what you gave us, it's interesting because at least for 2 months back to back, I don't know whether it extends beyond that, we've seen the eastern region, interestingly, because people would think that, oh, Accra is the hub of everything and things are more expensive here. We've seen the eastern region top with over 50% now in terms of inflation. The Greater Accra region is next. Also interesting, the Ashanti region is not even in the top 4. I didn't see them in the top 4. What explains these dynamics?
Okay, so again, thank you very much, Ben. And this is what I said. It's the disaggregation that matters. Let's keep two things in mind. One is the rate of inflation, and the other is the contribution to inflation. If you talk about rate of inflation, you are absolutely right. Eastern region had the highest rate of inflation of 51.5%. Again, you need to look at it at the disaggregated level in terms of food inflation, non-food inflation. And Volta region had the least inflation rate of 25.8%. Right. But when you talk about the contribution to inflation rate, Greater Accra, Ashanti region contributed more to the inflation rate than Eastern region. And the reason is simple. Greater Accra has a weight of 28.3%, almost 30% of its weight. That is, if you sum the weight across all the 16 regions, Greater Accra has almost 28%.
The Greater Accra region alone?
Yes.
Wow.
In terms of its weight.
Okay.
Then if you look at its contribution to the 40.4, Greater Accra contributed 34.7. So it contributed more than a third to the inflation rate that we saw in October. Although Eastern region had the highest rate of 51.5%. And Eastern region has a weight of just 10.3%. Ashanti region comes second, then Eastern region. So Eastern region did not contribute the most to the 40.4 inflation rate, although it had the highest inflation rate of 51.5%. The other thing that we need to think about is Central region had the highest food inflation. The way Eastern region came into the picture, it's balance across non-food and food inflation. But Eastern region and Ashanti region commanded, respectively, the highest rate of inflation for food and non-food inflation. But Eastern region came second in both. That is why overall they had this highest figure of 51.5%.
I find that really interesting, and I'd like us to stay there a bit. So when you look at the regional breakdowns, for example, would it technically mean that substantially things would be cheaper in the Volta region? Because recently, I think it was Franklin Kujo who went through and he said he bought, is this some cassava or tuber? I think it was cassava for X amount, and he felt that was expensive. And other people also said that, look, things are expensive across the board. Would it necessarily mean that if someone, comparatively, someone in the Greater Accra region, regardless, I mean, holding some things constant, would necessarily be buying garden eggs, aubergine and the rest, more expensively than someone in the Savannah region or the Volta region or Oti? Would it necessarily mean that?
I would say not necessarily. To a large extent, yes. And it goes back to the explanation I gave earlier on. Inflation rate is about changes in prices. It depends on the reference period. So if, for instance, in Volta region, something happened last year and they had ridiculously low rates in terms of prices last year, relative to Ashanti region or Eastern region that something happened last year and they had high prices, it would impact on the current inflation rate because of what happened last year.
Right.
So we always emphasize that inflation rate does not measure price levels. Inflation rate measures changes in price levels. And at Ghana Statistical Service, we have what we call the base drift effect. Whatever happened in your reference period would impact on whatever you are experiencing now. So with these high rates that we are recording now, indicating high prices now, next year is going to serve as the denominator for computing inflation rate. And once you're going to have this high denominator, if you calculate it, it's going to reduce the inflation figure.
So tell me then, with all of these dynamics, how watertight is our inflation calculation, so to speak? I pose that question because there have been challenges to, the inflationary figure put out there. People have said, look, what we are experiencing and what the Ghana Statistical Service is putting out there are not commensurable. They don't match. You've given one aspect of the explanation, being that your inflation as Professor Enim, Kobina Enim, would likely be different from mine unless we were practically consuming the same things or using the exact same things. So that is the first point. But how about those who say that, I don't know whether, maybe I'll start from here. Internationally, does every country use the same, I know we have the CPI and all of that, but does every country use the same metrics to determine inflation? What is it like?
So one part of the response is that we have international agencies that sort of provide standards, best practices for the computation of statistics. And we are adhering to one of these standards. So one of the standards is to use the consumer price index approach. And I can say on authority that most countries, I cannot say all countries, but most countries that are adhering to the United Nations fundamental principles of quality statistics use the CPI approach for the computation of inflation. And that is exactly what we are doing. Bernard, let me come back to your preamble. We have 307 items. And in the last release, we did indicate that this is the first time that we've seen all of the 307 items but one that have experienced increases in prices. And this is why I started a conversation on personal experiences with inflation. So all 306 out of the 307 items, we saw price increases for October. The variation had to do with the items with the highest change and the items with the least change. So as I indicated, diesel recorded the highest change of 155.6%. The only item that did not see, that saw a price reduction was shea butter. Otherwise, all the other items recorded increases. And we had some of them recording an increase of just 0.18%, 0.17%. So you see the variation.
So it's marginal.
155.6, the highest, right down to a 0.18 increase. So depending on where you find yourself, you're going to have a different experience with the rate of inflation. And what we are talking about is year-on-year inflation. we also put out the month-on-month inflation, which simply allows us to compare what happened in September 2022 with October 2022.
Right.
And we saw a 3.2 percentage, a 3.2 month-on-month inflation from a food perspective and 2.3 from a non-food perspective. So it is always in the details that we can appreciate and understand these dynamics. Otherwise, we can all be going about saying that I am not feeling the inflation, I am feeling the inflation, simply because of the differences in our lifestyles.
So when the likes of Professor Steve Hank of the Johns Hopkins University, you know, he watches many economies and has his projections, his league log when it comes to countries at the highest risk of debt distress and whose currencies are not faring well and those that are faring well. I mean, he singled out the US itself for some tongue lashing. But in recent times, you would notice that his inflationary rate for Ghana has been pretty high, much higher than what we have officially. The last time I checked, he had put up 148. Currently, it's at around 156%. Why these disparities?
So again, it's we understanding the variations in the methodology before we can speak to the numbers. As I indicated, we use the consumer price index approach, which simply says that we define a face basket, 307 items. We find out how these items are important to persons in Ghana. And on a monthly basis, we go to the market to collect data on prices, quantities, and also using the weight, as I explained earlier on. Ben, what Professor Steve Hanke does is what is called the purchasing power parity approach. And essentially, he's assuming that every commodity is internationally tradable. Every inflation that you can think about only goes through exchange rate effect. And this is simply not right, because it's not every item that would harness the full effect of exchange rate. So if an item is internationally tradable, then you see why, because if you are importing that item, then you can see why you can have the inflationary effect. But other items like Kobe, transport fares, and so on are country specific. The effect of the exchange rate would not be the same across all these commodities. So all that he does is to pick the exchange rate, the extent to which the city is devaluing, and then on the basis of that, calculate inflation.
So it's more of a PPI, purchasing power, PPP, purchasing power parity.
That is all
situation that he's doing. So your currency has depreciated by 54% as of now. These will be the consequences on your purchasing power.
That's all that.
Is it erroneous then for him to do that?
It's erroneous. As I said, it's not consistent, one, with the international standards. And let's think about it. It doesn't reflect the reality in the country. It doesn't take into consideration the relevance of these items. Now, if an item is not internationally tradable, you need to find some means of giving a price to that commodity. As I indicated, transport fares in Ghana would not be the same as transport fares in Nigeria. What you are going to pay for every kilometer, every 3 kilometers, it's very country specific. And the only way you can get it is if you are going to the market on regular basis to collect data on these items. Using the purchasing power parity approach simply means that every item has the same effect anytime exchange rate varies. And that is not true. I mean, if I'm doing from my farm to my dining table, the effect of that will definitely be different from somebody who is doing imported rice to the dining table. The effect of exchange rates would vary. So exchange rate has been identified as not a good measure for calculating inflation rate. That is why internationally it's encouraged that you use the consumer price index approach.
Okay, having made that point, I have had some speakers for government also contest him and say that, no, it can't be. I don't know whether I've heard the vice president on that. But are you saying then that over time, let's say over the last 10, 15, 20 years, the same model we're using is what we've stuck to. And that is what has reflected over these last, let's say, 20 years. Can you confirm that?
No, I can confirm that.
It's the same model we're using.
I can say that with authority. Ghana has stuck with the consumer price index approach. And indeed, Bernard, as I've indicated...
It's actually Benjamin.
Sorry, Benjamin. Pardon me. As I've indicated, statistics is about transparency. And that is where you get trust. And that is why on Wednesday, we're going to put out all our price. Come in. Let's walk you through how the computation is done. As I speak to you, I can share with you all the weights, all the prices across all the 307 items. And we open it up for people to calculate it and attest to that fact. If you get into our database and you see any price that is not consistent with what you think is happening on the market, you draw attention to it. And that is what Ghana Statistical Service is up to now.
Okay, so but even that brings to mind another crucial point. Looking at the fluidity of prices right now. Look, I went to purchase an item a week or so, no, about 2 weeks before I traveled, briefly. And the item was around 416 cedis. When I came back about a week after that, so that was what, 3 weeks, a little over 3 weeks, it had doubled. It was 800 plus cedis. So looking at the fluidity of some of the prices, even petrol, some will tell you that you go and buy it in the morning at this price. By the time you go in the afternoon, the price has changed. How do you keep track? How are you able to, stay on top of those figures?
So again, these are very important questions, and please let's encourage people to read our methodological guide. It explains all these in detail. We collect prices on a monthly basis, and we collect prices in the first week of every month. Okay. So what that means is that the rates that we put out there for October is reflective of changes that happened up until the first week of October. Any price change that happened from the second week of October to the end of October to the end of October would be reflected in the November release, which we are going to do in December. And this is why we explain the pass-through effect. So if something changes in the second week of October and it remains as it is till the first week of November, we're going to pick that up when we collect our prices in the first week of November. If that item has pass-through effects, we will not exhaust the pass-through effect until it's gone through all the different items, as I explained with petrol. So I hear a lot of people saying that in October, a lot of things have changed. But the point that we are making is that all those changes that we saw in the second week of October, if we do the release in December, for November, we're going to pick up all the effects. And let's keep in mind that you would only see it if you compare it with the same period last year. Right. If you're comparing it with January, your calculation will be different because we are doing a year-on-year change and a month-on-month change.
Okay. Staying on that point then, you've spoken about Professor Hank's PPP model and how it's not appropriate in our context. But then, do you feel, with all the talk about inflation is high and inflation is this, do you feel then that we politicize it? And here's where I'm coming from. A few years ago, and I apologize for having to do this, but our political elements and what they say feeds into this. A few years ago, we heard our current vice president say he challenged the Ghana Statistical Service and the Bank of Ghana, asking them to come clean on the credibility of the country's inflation, official inflation, and exchange rates. And he raised this concern. He wrote an article and says, the Bank of Ghana rate couldn't possibly be true. Where in Ghana today can you buy $1 at close to 3 cedis and 3 pesos? The reason I'm bringing this in, that's the very same thing that Professor Hank is also leveraging. The bit about the exchange rate and how this impacts items, consumables, generally down the ladder. So then, is it that sometimes political elements or leaders get it wrong? Because if it's right then, it should be right now, right?
I mean, I wouldn't be tempted to get into that debate of political element and how they do things, but I'm going to approach it from...
So let's look at the approach. What is said here about doubting the official rates? Would it be valid?
That's what I'm coming to, Ben. Let's approach it from the perspective of what we are doing now as statistics. And I'm going to share with you just two things. Ghana Statistical Service is a state institution, Bank of Ghana is a state institution, and obviously the presidency is trying to get things right for all of us as a country. What we've not done in the past is what I said earlier on, the extent of transparency and the extent to which state institutions engage. As I speak to you now, we are regularly engaging the central bank in how we are computing our inflation. What we did just last 2 weeks was to bring all the media, our colleagues in the media space together and say to them that if you take the exchange rate from a time series point of view, and you take inflation from a time series point of view, and you do a simple analysis between exchange rate and inflation rate, you get a figure of about 30%. And that is the extent to which our data points to the relationship between exchange rate and inflation rate. So for somebody to come out and say that exchange rate should be the sole indicator for computing inflation rate is erroneous. And this is what I tried explaining to you earlier on. What we are also doing is to sit around. You realize that we recently redistributed the weight across the regions to cover the 6 new regions that we've had.
Right.
And it took us that time because we needed a full year's data to be able to do that year-on-year comparison.
To strike the average.
Yes. And this is how come we've been able to say that instead of Brongahafo, the then Brongahafo region, having exactly, all that we did was redistribute the weight of Brongahafo across the 3 new administrative regions for the then Brongahafo region. And we've engaged the central bank on all these processes for them to get a better appreciation of how the weights impact on the inflation rate that we put out there annually. I can confidently say that we have engaged the presidency on what we should look out for if we really want to bring down inflation rate. And they do appreciate the impact that fuel price changes is having on them, is having on, the cost of living and other commodities. Indeed, there is a behavioral side to the inflation rate that we all should appreciate. And that behavioral part is the instinct for sellers to, not based on any reason. Arbitrarily, that's the word I wanted, increase prices. And it's so unfortunate that people now wait on the inflation figure and say that based on the inflation figure, I'm changing prices, which indeed is the reverse, because it's the changes in prices that is happening on the market that we are reporting. And this is the kind of education that we want, especially the Ministry of Information, to put out there.
And indeed, that is also impacting because sometimes, look, there are some, I also saw a video of someone selling palm oil. And the person was questioning. I said, palm oil there, we don't import it into Ghana. So why are you also hiking your prices by this much? But the person could also tell you, transporting it and all of that, which is where all the things you are talking about come through. Quick questions before we get to the African Statistical Week. You spoke about Ghana having being a statistics driven nation. I would like us to talk about that in terms of how we can achieve it in auditing policy and all of that. You started talking about it. I want further detail. I also want you to confirm this for me. Have we then had an increment in our inflation 17 months straight? Is that correct?
We started seeing an increase from October 2021, so it puts it
so that would be
12
October, November, December.
Then another 10 months, so 13.
13 months, all right. So before you get to the statistics-driven nation, planting for food and jobs, I'm sure you've seen recently, because we're talking food security as well. Their drive to sell food at the ministry and all of that, source food from Sishiri and other places. Based on what you've told me about inflation and the distribution, is that practical in terms of reducing, I don't know how to put it, but carting goods to Accra from a place like that? Would it do anything in terms of combating inflationary prices on that specific item? Would it do anything to beat down inflation?
I mean, definitely. As I indicated, inflation is simply a market-driven approach. It depends on what people want and what you are putting at their disposal. So once you have more on the market, then the suppliers, the sellers would start competing among themselves. And because agricultural produce are highly perishable, they try to beat down the price. So that is the economics of it. The concern that I have, which relates to what I said earlier on, making Ghana a statistics-driven country, is to what extent would it reduce inflation?
Okay.
And in what commodities are we closing that gap? And whether our taste and preferences would allow us to respond positively to that. Okay. So this is what we always need to think about. As a country, what is our taste? As people, do we believe that bringing plantain will solve the issue, or we still want to get stuck with our imported rice? And in that case, how are you addressing it? So although we are seeing an increase in our crops production, the question is that, is it consistent with people's preferences? And that is why Statistical Service, from next month, we're going to roll out a telephone survey, because definitely what is happening now is people changing their taste and preferences. So people now begin to change their lifestyles given the current economic circumstances. How they are changing it towards which direction of commodities is what we need to find out. And from my personal point of view, this is the best time we need to weigh the balance between healthy eating and eating for the sake of it. Because now you need to make adjustments.
Yeah.
And what are you changing to? Is this the time
There's always an exchange.
Exactly. Is it the time that we need to begin to think about the effect of sugar, the effect of oils and all that? And this is what comes back to the issue of food security. And a lot of people are struggling to get a connection between increases in our crops, which one would argue that is driven by the planting for foods and jobs agenda, relative to what people really want to consume in terms of a healthy eating. Food security is not just about availability of food. Food security is about the extent to which you are eating healthy diet, the proportion of your income that you are spending on food, and obviously the availability. So availability is just one out of the 8 dimensions by which we measure food security. And that is why in Ghana, we see this high rate of food insecurity of about 49%. Because of the health component and because of the proportion of our incomes that we spend on food.
That's an interesting point to make. Anyway, so you could actually bring in whatever product, but even in that region, if it's not what people consume a lot, you'd be wasting your time.
Absolutely.
Let's look at, finally, before we get to it, what Ghana should do to become a statistics-driven country when it comes to policy and all of that.
So we, at Ghana Statistical Service, we are driving that agenda, and that is why we've created a public policy unit within the Statistical Service. I can say on authority that if you take all our policy documents, most of them do not have statistical targets. The few that have statistical targets, nobody monitors it, nobody audits it, and how realistic those targets are is not a subject for discussion. And this is what we mean by making Ghana a statistics-driven country. I recently engaged with the Ministry of Local Government, Decentralization and Rural Development, they are currently looking at their urban policy. And my priority recommendation was, let's make the new target statistically driven. And the only way you can do that is that as a country, now it's urban population of 56.7%. What do we want as a country? What is ideal for us as a country in terms of urbanization? What proportion of our people should live there? As the government
studies... Because you obviously can't have everyone move from the rural areas into the urban areas.
And we should have
a policy. How are we going to feed ourselves, for example?
Exactly.
Right.
And as the government statistician, one of my biggest concerns has to do with these rates that we are talking about. What is the ideal unemployment rate that we want as a country? Now we're talking about an unemployment rate of 13.9.
Right.
And I refer to this as politicization of statistics because if it goes up, we talk about it. If it comes down, we talk about it. But as a country, what do we want? What is our threshold when it comes to statistics?
That's an interesting point you make there as well, because in other jurisdictions, the US and others, I've seen this go up to about 3-4% in other places, and there's hue and cry about, hey, unemployment rate is too high. While here so it's important that we have some sort of standardization. This is what averagely we look at. If we get below it, fine. If we get above it, these are the indicators. How difficult a task do you feel that is going to be, looking at the generality of our policy?
I think that responsibility really rests with us, that is Ghana Statistical Service, like we're just doing now, to push the policymakers to really think about what we are doing with statistics. I'll give you a typical example. We've tried to move the conversation away from unemployment because at Ghana Statistical Service, we are saying that what we should be thinking about is vulnerable employment rather than unemployment. So we have to guide the policymakers in terms of what they have to look at. It's a country which is highly informal. Earlier on, you asked me whether our computation of CPI inflation is consistent with international standards. We push for international standards and also push for contextualization. What should we measure in this country? If you are measuring unemployment by simply asking somebody, in your reference period, let's say the last 7 days, did you work for an hour with salary? And the person sold oranges for 1 hour, hawked, the person says, I'm employed. And then we capture it as part of our employment and we exclude that person from unemployment.
So we need to begin to think about vulnerable employment, which we give a very simple definition to it by saying that, are you working in an environment where it's contract-based, it's pension-based? Are you your own self-worker, or are you contributing to a family work? So once you are contributing to a family work, you are your own worker, self-employed without employees, then clearly we tag you as somebody who is in a vulnerable employment. You see, if we don't deal with these things at the micro level, that is what makes the whole country fragile. And with our people who are employed, about 2/3 of them are in vulnerable employment. So anytime there is a little shock, like COVID-19, like the Russia invasion of Ukraine, then Ghana becomes vulnerable, fragile, and then it affects all of us because there's lack of security in all that we do. There's no long-term agenda to take us through what we need for transformation.
So that lack of statistical planning is biting us. And even another end of the conversation that comes to mind when you talk about unemployment, underemployment, where you can have people skilled. I mean, imagine a trained medical doctor who is doing blue collar, so let's talk welding, for example. He has his training in there, and it's not to demean anybody, but you've been trained to achieve something, to do something, contribute something to the state. And he's welding. Obviously, if there's no job in that respect, we are losing what we could get from his medical expertise and all of that. Does that factor into your computations as well?
Yes, underemployment is one of the statistics that we put out there. And you are spot on with the definition. It's simply underutilization of your skills. That is simply what it is. And the other side would be, if you want to literally give it a definition of the number of hours that you are putting your potential skill to. And this is exactly, and this should also, I'm happy the Ministry of Communication is coming up with our digital policy. You see, we should have these conversations in terms of how can we transform our labor to respond to the global changes that we are seeing.
Right.
And if the ministries, departments, and agencies are not aligned in that way, we're going to see the mismatch that you're talking about. A lot of people are scared of the transformation because they think they're going to be unemployed.
I was about to ask as well that these institutions you're targeting, is there pushback? Because yes, they have their policies, but in terms of setting, you're basically going to push them to set targets that we should achieve this by this time or that time. Are you getting pushback from these institutions? Because I don't think they're just going to take it and it's just going to be more pressure on them.
I'm going to be blunt in this sense that I'm yet to get a formal reception of this policy. And why I say that is the things that I talked about during my inaugural lecture. And Ben, I put it out there strongly that a lot of countries have what they call the National Productivity Board. And that is what you do as a country that wants to progress on the front of statistics. Okay. You have a productivity board that audits policies on a regular basis and say that you set yourself to achieve A, B, C, D. Which of them were you able to achieve? Why were you not able to achieve them? KPIs. We've talked about this. And a lot of people are concerned about that link between productivity and pay. And now we are in conversation with the Controller and Accountant General Department, and what we want to put out there are the disparities in salaries and begin to have output for each MDA.
Okay.
So that we can see that the Ministry of Health is contributing X to our GDP, and we are paying the Ministry of Health that. Until we start doing those comparisons, I'm not too sure where we'll be headed with
chasing the wind, eh?
whatever growth model that we have.
Let's talk about Africa Statistics Day, November 18, annually, and our week-long, activities here. I doubt many people would know of the fact that we even have a day like that, where we're going to be contemplating statistics in Africa, the different dimensions of it. But what exactly this year is the theme, and what are the focal areas, thematic areas?
So this year's theme is on generally agricultural statistics, and the way the continent has crafted the theme is, and I like that word so much, having resilient agricultural statistics, having resilient food security statistics, and having resilient nutrition statistics. That link and the word resilient is what we are focusing on this year. What that simply means is that we need to assess our agricultural statistics and see whether it's been volatile or not. And I can say on authority that it is volatile. And this is related to what I said earlier on. The economy itself is fragile because we are easily hit by external shocks.
Right.
And one of which is agricultural statistics. So today you see crops growing at a rate of 9.4%. The next time is 8.4% on a quarter-on-quarter basis. And currently crops, we are saying it's contributing, is growing by 4.5%. So clearly our cultural statistics shows volatility. So what we seek to achieve on the continent is how do we make these statistics resilient? And the only way we can make the statistics resilient is how responsive we are to policy interventions from the agricultural sector point of view. Now we are seeing enormous growth, but the question is, can it be sustained? Then the next question is, how do we link agricultural statistics, crops production, to what I said earlier on, food security and to nutrition? If you are not eating healthy diet, if you are not growing what people want to consume, you will never see that link between agricultural statistics in terms of crop production and food security. You're not going to see that link with nutrition. And that is why the high rate of stunting, underweight, and overweight that we have should be a matter of concern, and see how we can link agricultural statistics to these outcome variables.
So in the course of this week, I know you're going to have some people speak to certain issues, CPI, the Consumer Price Index, and inflation, labor force, among other things. Tell us about some of these thematic areas.
So let me start with what is going to happen on the very day that is the African Statistics Day. And
that is the 18th.
That is the 18th, which is Friday. As a service and as a country, we've deemed it important to get somebody from the academic space to come and tell us where we are with our agricultural statistics, the statistical targets that we talked about. So what we expect this speaker to do is to take the planting for food and jobs, for instance. Look at the statistical targets in there. One, tell us whether they are available, tell us whether they are exhaustive, and tell us whether they can take us to where we want to go in terms of the transformation that we want to achieve. Because if you don't think about the statistical targets in our policy documents, we wouldn't know where we are headed. Ben, there are three things that I talked about earlier on, and one of them I want to emphasize, I want to repeat it here. It's about addressing the inflation rate from a stocks of grain perspective. And I say that as a country, we don't know where we have yam and in what quantities we have yam and what type of yam. That is what stock of grains does. You earlier on made a point. We don't know the build-up cost, even with our imports. So for instance, if you get a bag of rice landing at any of our ports and is captured, what is the cost build-up to the final market? If you don't know the cost build-up, policymakers will not know whether to target the cost of the import, which will be affected by exchange rate, or deal with the intermediary, which is going through 10 hands instead
add to the cost.
This is exactly what we want to do. And that is why we are going to put out statistics, or we are pushing the Ministry of Food and Agric to have the stocks of grains. I'm happy an authority is going to be set up in that regard and eventually going to achieve that. The other thing that we talk about is our vulnerabilities when it comes to commodities. There are some commodities that Ghana relies on only one country when it comes to importation, and there are certain commodities that Ghana relies on only one country when it comes to exports. If you don't assess the fragilities of these countries, any shock that happens in those countries would affect us. And that is the statistics that Ghana Statistical Service is going to put out there. So on Wednesday, we're going to do a data fair at the Accra International Conference Center and show some of these experimental statistics. I call them experimental statistics because they are not statistics that have reached international recognition that we have a standard in measuring them. So for instance, internationally, we put out our trade balance. But as an economist, if you ask me, what we should be putting out as a country is what I call the trade vulnerabilities. Because now we are feeling the full impact on the Russia-Ukraine war because we are relying on these countries for certain specific commodities.
I mean, even as you speak of agriculture, inputs, fertilizer, it's quite a complicated mess, isn't it?
Statistics-driven country.
So we have the data fair on Wednesday, of course. Another interesting bit. On Tuesday, you talk about commemoration of the birth of the world's 8 billionth baby. I found that interesting because recently I was reading an article that said that, yes, we may have hit 8 billion, but there's actually going to be a bit of a contraction in terms of the world's population, and it may, reduce by a bit. Of course, in the context, they were also thinking about food security moving forward, because as we get more mouths, they will also need feeding and all of that. In our particular situation or context, at least we know that we're around 31 million people, and the projections going ahead also show that it's going to be burgeoning. How that will impact us, maybe we need to go back to what you're saying. Policy which is statistically driven, so that we don't face some of the knock-on effects that are expected. Having said all of this, and to maybe cap off the conversation, what really can we expect in the course of this week? What will be the impact of this week? What are you hoping the impact of this week will be? Not just for workers of the Ghana Statistical Service, but for the generality of Ghanaians, education-wise and all of that.
So let me start this way. And I'm happy you've created this platform for us to engage. And from my point of view, that is a good starting point, the conversation around how important statistics is. Ben, there has been a recent study that suggests that if you invest $1 in a statistical system, the returns is $32 on the average. 1:32.
Okay.
Indeed, the variation is from $7 to $73, depending on who is investing and what you are investing in. If we really want to see transformation of livelihoods in Ghana, the starting point is statistics. And that is what we want to achieve this week. The communication about what we stand to gain as a country, how Ghana Statistical Service sits on different policy environments to make a case on what is happening. I'm happy you've mentioned what is going to happen on Tuesday. So globally, it's projected that we're going to reach 8 billion on 15th, which is tomorrow. And Ghana, we're going to commemorate that by celebrating it. The importance of that day is that although it's a global agenda, we have individual country experiences, and this is the time that we need to reflect on our experience as a country. We've just done a population and housing census. We've put our figure as 30,832,019 persons. Definitely that is not the interest of Ghana Statistical Service. The interest of Ghana Statistical Service is the characteristics of the 30.8 million. And one of the issues that we talk about is the youth bulge that we are beginning to see. So you're getting a lot of people within the 15 to 35 age bracket. And demographically, it says you need to harness the dividend of that youth bulge. And that is why we are interested in the characteristics. So immediately we put out the youth bulge, the next thing we put out there is their educational qualification. The next thing we put out there... What
do you get out of them?
Those who are... That should be the conversation.
Yeah, what do you get out of them? These people are more... the word more fit for this purpose. They are skilled in this. What do we do with them? What is our gap in that particular respect? How many accountants do we need? It's...
So that is why we put out a statistics on the youth who are not in education, who are not in employment, and who are not in training. We call it the NEET. If you're having a youth bulge, and about a third of the youth are not in employment, are not in education, are not in training, it has implications for other social issues.
You end up with a lot of liabilities instead of assets, and a toll on the country's, public purse. Just because you speak of education as well, are you going to tap into the NCCE, for example, to help drive some of these things that you say, especially when it comes to the public and all of that?
We've not done a lot with NCCE, I must admit, but certainly going forward, we need to do that. This has been on our agenda, but we are yet to action it, especially when we found that 8 million of our population are illiterates. And we have to work with NCCE on this. And I always say that we are not able to get the full benefits of our policies because you are dealing with 8 million people who are illiterate. And it's one of the policy issues that the statistical targets that we need to look at, because I keep asking whether the Ministry of Education is aware that 8 million people are illiterate. Because in their policy documents, they put a figure of about 1.2 million and over people who are illiterate. And this is where we need to sit as state institutions to reconcile these figures. Because if indeed you have about a third of your population, 6 years and above, who are illiterate, no policy would work.
That's some 25% of the population. That's a quarter of the population, or a little over that.
And no, don't calculate it on the 30 million. Calculate it on less than the 30 million, because we don't capture illiteracy for those between 0 to 5.
You have a point. You have a point. They are out of that.
So it's indeed about a third of our population who are illiterate.
That is staggering.
Cannot read or write in any language with understanding. So communication breaks down.
We have work to do as a country. But thank you so much, Prof, for having joined the conversation. It's always so insightful, so it's a real brain tease when you come around. And we laud the work that you're doing. It's good that for some of the questions on the minds of people, especially in terms of your basket that you use, measuring inflation and all of that, you've given quite a bit of understanding this morning. Thank you so much.
Pleasure.
So that is Professor Samuel Komra, a NIM government statistician. But also coming up on the show, the colleges of education are up in arms over certain benefits they are not getting. That is the Teachers Association and their non-teaching staff as well. These two unions are protesting what they say is the failure of the Fair Wages and Salaries Commission to make available to them a draft memorandum of understanding for their earlier negotiations. We'll be getting into the details of that next after the break. Do stay.
Thank you so much for staying on the AM show. I am Bernice Abubedulansa. This morning, the Colleges of Education Teachers Association of Ghana, CTAG, and their Non-Teaching Staff Association are on strike. These two unions are protesting what they say is the failure of the Fair Wages and Salaries Commission to make available to them a draft memorandum of understanding for their earlier negotiations. Now, the groups are also asking for equality in the disbursement of fuel, vehicle maintenance, and off-campus allowances. We'll hear from them on the show shortly. Prince Obinghima is National CTAG President, and he's joined us for a conversation. But before that, let me just bring you some details of this reactivation of indefinite strike letter. And it reads, following the joint communique issued by CTAG and CENSAG on Sunday, 6 November 2022, given the employer 5 crucial working days to address our concerns, failure of which we shall reactivate our suspended indefinite strikes, the National Councils of both CTAG and CENSAG held separate emergency meetings on Friday 11th and Saturday 12th November 2022 respectively, and affirmed the decision to reactivate our suspended indefinite industrial action effective Monday, 14th November 2022. Our decision to withdraw our services indefinitely is as a result of the following. I'll just pick a few of them. The first one, failure of the Fair Wages and Salaries Commission to make available to CTAG and CENTAG draft memorandum of agreement, which clearly captures what the parties mutually agreed on at the end of our negotiations for us to study before proceeding to sign off. It says a unilateral variation of the effective date of CTAG's 2021 conditions of service by the Fair Wages and Salaries Commission from 1st January 2022 to 1st January 2023, contrary to the rules of engagement for the negotiations. Skip to 5. An unfair retrospective deduction of office holding allowances paid to some members of CENSAG and CTAG by the Controller and Accountants General Department, and a deliberate variation of fuel, vehicle maintenance, and off-campus allowances of CTAG and CENSAG members as compared to our counterparts in other analogous institutions in the face of rising cost of fuel prices in the country. Like I mentioned, we have President of CTAG, Mr. Obinghima, joining us for the conversation. Good morning, sir. Thank you for joining the program.
Good morning.
Right. So, just to start off this conversation, CTAG was supposed to give you an the Fair Wages and Salaries Commission was supposed to give you an MOU. They didn't do that. Did you reach out to them to find out why?
Let me say good morning to you, and then your platform being so big, I know the entire nation is listening to you. Members of SITAG and non-teaching staff across the 46 public colleges of education should be doing the listening. Indeed, it's true that the Fair Wages and Salaries Commission built to us MOU, but we realized that the MOU did not reflect what we had agreed on during the negotiation. So that is why we think they have not been fair to us, and we couldn't have signed that because we couldn't have negotiated something and you give us a different MOU altogether to sign. Particularly, when we are talking about 2022 conditions of service, which ought to have started in January 2022, something we started in August 2021. And for no reason or no fault of SITAG, it had to drag on up to, a couple of weeks ago. When we finished and you tell us that unilaterally, you've decided to take the effective date on January 2023, question out the whole of 2022, I think it's unfair. And it's against the rules of engagement that we signed prior to the negotiation.
Right.
Yes.
So my question to you is that you were negotiating with your employer through the Fair Wages and Salaries Commission. You gave an ultimatum. You were given an MOU. The MOU didn't capture all that you had agreed on during the meeting. Did you go back to the Fair Wages and Salaries Commission before reactivating your suspended strike?
But they sent us a letter wanting to engage us. But the spirit of the letter created an impression like engaging us in further negotiation. When indeed we have documents, we have audio recordings, we have minutes to prove that negotiation had ended. The state that we find ourselves in doesn't require any form of negotiation. It just requires the people giving us MOA, which is, part of the things we've been doing over the years. At the end of the negotiation, there should be MOA signed by the two parties, which will spell out the roadmap that will lead to the payment of what we have negotiated for. That's where we are. So to create the impression that you are engaging us for another negotiation, for us, it's just to engage us so that only God knows when that engagement will end. And we think in the face of the Biden economy, we shouldn't accept that.
So if I get you clearly, Mr. Obinghima, you are not ready to sit over a matter that has been discussed already. You just want that memorandum of agreement to be adjusted, as you say, according to what was agreed, then the parties can sign.
Exactly so. That is what we want. Because where we are, we don't need roundtable negotiation. What we need is clear MOU that captures the spirit and what I feel that we have all negotiated for, so that we can have a look at it. We have said they could even send us a draft of what they want us to sign. We'll look at it. If it really reflects the interest, we've done it before, we can sign a portion, send it through courier service. They would also have theirs signed. And then we take it from there. On the issue of the all-year-round teaching, which is also another big issue on the table, you recall that a couple of months ago, we went on leave and block, which became news because it had never happened in the tertiary space. Our argument had been that you were using the teachers throughout the year, which grossly violated our rights as union members. Because we don't have enough facilities, the students are put into two groups. At any point in time, one group is in school, they finish their academic work on Friday. On Sunday, the other group at home can't take their position. And it's the same teachers you use in them. So when we discussed and it became clear that we were on a legitimate course and that we had to apply to the ministry, we did that through PENCOP, through GTEC. We have followed through, and PENCOP and GTEC have since forwarded our letter, put covering letter on it, and sent to the ministry. We are yet to get response, and we cannot continue along that tangent. So this one too doesn't require any meeting. We think it's a matter of the ministry writing to the Ministry of Finance and liaising with the Comptroller and Accountant General for them to effect payment to hit our account. So those are the issues.
Right. Mr. Obinghima, I haven't heard from the employment minister on your particular issues, but your other colleagues who teach at the basic and senior high school levels just resumed from a strike. And he's been trying to talk them out of such action by suggesting that their concerns are legitimate, but the times are hard, and that groups like yourself should also take into cognizance the current economic crisis, what government is going through. I'm sure such similar arguments may be raised concerning your strike. What is your response to that?
Whoever says the nation is not in serious or messy economic situation might be, a hypocrite. We all have made the situation we find ourselves in. But let us also be, truthful to ourselves. That the laws of Ghana, the very constitution, 1992 constitution that binds all of us together, front against any form of discrimination. In the face of the economic situation that we find ourselves in, we cannot say that there is a group of, or a group of workers exist without conditions of service. And let me even be more direct. The people who are representing government in all the things we are doing, in all the discussions we have, none of them would say they have no conditions of service. We are part of the members of the tertiary space. There isn't any group within the space that has no condition of service. So to single us out, and I'm not sure the employment ministry that has always been fair will come out with this argument. To single us out and say that, for instance, fuel allocation that has been agreed upon to be given to members in the tertiary space so they will be able to transport themselves to and from their houses, workplaces, shouldn't be given us because we are in dire economic situation. I'm not sure they will say that. I'm not sure they will say we shouldn't have conditions of service at all, just the way others are having, or contrary to what our colleagues are having because we are in dire economic condition. I'm not sure anybody will move that argument. But that will amount to total discrimination, which the 1992 Constitution emboldens us to, as it were, reject and fight against it.
So, if I get you clearly once again, CTAG and SENSAC members do not have any conditions of service. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, we are on a tight conditions of service. So, we do not have, not until we have finished negotiating what ought to have started in 2022, January, we do not have conditions of service for the record.
Right. So I'm assuming this morning you're stepping out to the various colleges of education to assess the mood and see the impact of your strike. But do I get a confirmation from you that all your members are on strike effective today?
We have done the monitoring. My zonal chairpersons across the 5 zones, the northern, the central, western, Ashanti, Volta, Eastern, Greater Accra. This morning, we've been in touch with all of them. And I wish to commend the gallant members of CISAG and SENSAC for, following through with the directives and compliance. I can assure you that apart from the security personnel who are entrusted with the responsibility of protecting lives and property, the entire staff in the College of Education are on strike, and it's happening.
Right. We appreciate your time here this morning. Prince Obinghima is National President of CTAG, and he's been speaking on behalf of SENSAC as well. The two groups have declared a strike effective today. In fact, it is a reactivation of their indefinite strike, and it's over various issues, including conditions of service, fuel, and off-campus allowances. We'll be monitoring this closely and let you know how it goes. We're hoping to get a response from the Fair Wages and Salaries Commission because they have a major role to play in all of this. The group accuses them of not including all the issues that were deliberated on in the Memorandum of Agreement for which they've decided to go on strike. Mr. Hima tells us unless that is rectified, they will not go back to the classroom. So we will keep trying to reach the Fair Wages and Salaries Commission and furnish you on all the details that we receive from them. Hello, once again. Thank you so much for staying on the AM show. I'm all smiles because it's now time to celebrate 7 of my colleagues who did amazing over the weekend. They won awards at the GJA ceremony. I'm told 8 of them actually picked up some awards. And one of them is sitting right by me, Daryl. Congratulations, Daryl. So I listened to you after you picked up the award when you were interviewed. You said, yeah, though you fouled, you didn't see this coming. Tell us about the story that won you the award.
All right, so I did a story about Israela Manso. She is the CEO of Mansuki Ghana Limited. Is one of Africa's biggest beauty brands. And well, I think that we've done a story about people who do stuff like beauty stuff a lot. And so what distinguishes her story was what she had to go through before building such a brand. Now, to have a beauty brand that stands out in the whole of Africa is such a big deal because she's also exporting to other parts of the world. And she started this business out of frustration. She had finished university. She wasn't getting a job. And so many people can relate. I mean,
exactly.
people have gone to school and they're struggling to get a job. And hey, the finance minister said the other time, there are no jobs in the public sector. So what do? So rather than sit down and complain and say, I mean, there's no hope for the future, she decided to start something with 300 cedis then, which was about $80. Right now, I think that the value has gone down because we know
what's happening there, the depreciation.
Yeah. And with 300 cedis then, she was able to start this business, which is one of the biggest in Africa at this point. And so that is the story that got us the award. I think for me, the reason I feel it got that much attention is because of the situation with unemployment in the country. We know so many people are out of jobs at this point. And also, I feel it's also an endorsement or a recognition of the work that we've done with the Joy Business Van over the years, telling the story of small businesses, especially around this time. It's difficult to run a business. So, I mean, the sort of visibility we give them, the sort of platform we give them to tell their stories and to also inspire others who want to do something similar to do so, I think is recognition of that work that we have done.
Yes, and if you don't watch Joy Business Van, you need to watch that really wonderful, tremendous, peculiar stories of entrepreneurs right here in Ghana who are braving, the odds. They are just pushing down every hurdle and doing what they know how to do.
You could be a good marketer. You'll be a good marketer.
So you need to watch. You need to watch Joy Business Van. It's a good one if you're one who wants to be an entrepreneur. So Daryl picked up the award for the business and economics category. Multimedia picked up 8 awards. 7 of my individuals picked one. Newsfire won an award. That's what adds up to 8. But one other person who picked up an award, Manuel Cranting, my colleague, he was awarded the Komla Dumont Most Promising Journalist Award. And he's been doing amazing. And he'll be joining us shortly. My colleague, Jojo Kobada, will also be joining us shortly. And if you're somebody who watches JoyNews a lot, you should know that name by now.
Jojo Kobana.
Jojo Kobana.
Good with features and documentaries. I'm especially excited for him as well.
Yes.
He got this.
Yeah, and
he's a good storyteller.
Yeah, if you were JoyNews tracker, you're likely going to hear Jojo. He does most of them. This particular one was on witches. We'll be getting into the details of that particular story. But Daryl, I mean, you've told us what won you the award, but tell us how long have you been doing this? And is this the first award you've picked? How did you feel?
Okay, so we've won several awards with the work we do with Joy Business Van, but this is the first GJA award. So you know GJA is a very big something, recognition as a best business journalist. Also the first ever award from GJA to Joy Business Newsroom. And so that also makes it quite historical because, I mean, even though we do amazing stuff in Joy Business, we haven't attained that feat. And so this is also, I feel, is a win for the team and for all the hard work that we've done over the years. I've been at this. I've been working here for 9 years. November was my 9th year here. And I remember, I don't want to get emotional, but it was Kwashi who got me this job. He called me, said he wanted to give me a job and said, I want you to do business reporting. Then I told him, I've not done anything business reporting anywhere else. I don't think I can
business is not actually your niche. I thought you came in as a business reporter.
Not at all. And so I was just wondering how I was going to survive this field of business, but he told me, I know you can do it. And yeah, he gave me the opportunity. And with the Joy Business One project as well, I remember the day he called me into his office. That was just close by, just here, if you know. And then he said, we are starting a new project, and I want to entrust this project in your hands. And I'm like, really? Because I was just barely a year into the job. He says, I know you can do it. And so I'm going to entrust it to your hands. And today, I just wish he was here to just see the outcome.
The fruit of all the encouragement.
And you know, always has this look when he's very proud of you.
Yeah.
I wish he was here too.
Oh,
but yeah, I also want to recognize Emma Morrison, who also opened my eyes to the world of TV. She put me on TV, gave me my first TV show. She always had my back. All my amazing bosses, Fifi Kumsin, Charles Nexinyoboa, KOP, everybody. It's been quite a journey.
It's a tall list.
Yeah, and every day we are learning something. Like, I don't claim to know everything about business, but it's been a learning process, and I've grown over time. And I believe that these people have been instrumental as well.
All right. So you just heard him mentioning all those who have helped him along in this journey. He mentioned one name, Elvis Kwashi, and there's somebody who also mentioned Elvis Kwashi, even though he was not here in person to pick up his award. He went onto Facebook to do that. I'm talking about Manuel Kranting. He joins us via Zoom. Manuel Kranting is away in school in the UK, but his work has paid off. Manuel, you cannot imagine how proud we are of you. So hardworking, so dedicated. Well done. Congratulations. I know. How do you feel? How did you get to know in the first place that you picked up this award?
Well, I mean, first of all, Ben, it feels overwhelming, definitely overwhelming. With all of the journalists in Ghana, you seem to be the most promising one in the year under review. That's huge for me. How did I get to hear about this? So 2 levels. I got to hear about the nominations on Monday, and it was just from a random person who just sent me a WhatsApp message and said, "Congratulations, Manuel, you worked so hard for this." And I'm like, "Hello, wait, slow down a bit. What is all of this about?" And then he sends me a document that had my name as part of 25 nominees selected to receive GJ awards later in the week. And I was like, no way. Yeah. I mean, I filed for the nominations with the guidance of the co-super and everybody. But was I really expecting it? I don't know if I was. You know. And then on Saturday, I had a book review event to attend. And so myself, I was, in transit from the book review, started watching the event. In the bus, continued watching, and until I got into my room, when I eventually saw that I had won the award. It's overwhelming. It dates way back to somewhere in October 2020 when Elvis called me into his office after I'd done one story and then said, "Look, you must win this," and his inclination was that I had something, even at that point, I didn't know that I had, and he thought that we should grow that thing that was in me. And so, I mean, he will guide you. You're tired. You go and do a story. He comes back. You come back and he calls you into his office. This story could have been done better this way. You could have expanded it this way. You can go back and do it again. But, all of those things. And I mean, sometimes you feel, but Elvis, I'm tired. I came in the morning. Like, can I do it tomorrow? And he's like, okay, so we can tell the viewers and the listeners that, okay, today JoyNews is tired, so we'll continue tomorrow. And so, all of that. And it's just heartbreaking that Elvis, who literally started this journey with me, is not here today to see the results of his work, of his investment, of his guidance. And I really pray and hope that wherever he is right now, he's definitely proud, and Elvis did it.
So, I mean, we know you for Clean Ghana. We know you for many stories. But which particular story did you file for this award?
Well, Ben, this is a story I filmed on 11th August 2021. It's about a 10-year-old boy, Ebenezer Opamwo, who was living and sleeping freely under the Kwame Nkrumah interchange, the bridges there, with his mentally challenged mother. And, they didn't have a place to go. They were literally living there, eating there, sleeping there, doing everything there. We went to do Clean Ghana, and we saw him in just a mix. He wasn't really the focus. He was never the focus of the story that we went to do. We just saw him there and decided, look, why is a boy walking about here carrying blankets when he's supposed to be in school? And as you're seeing on your screen right now, he's very shabbily dressed, his sandals in tatters, his trousers in tatters, and I'm thinking, why is this young boy over here? So we got closer to him, and we would eventually learn of the full story, which we thought, we cannot leave this boy on the streets. We definitely need to do something to get him off the streets. And that's how we did the story. It was such, it was such a daunting task bringing this story home. Look, I've done so many stories. I've gone into the mountains. I've done stories in floods. I've literally been walking in flood waters. And look, this was a story that I had to definitely move beyond my reporting skills to investing myself into the story, because but for that, I don't think I would have been able to bring the story home, because the social welfare officer who came was on foot. She came alone. And the mother of the boy was very aggressive, literally pelting us with stones, biting us, and all of that. I don't know how we're going to have been able to bring this story home if we did not have a company car with us, if we did not go to the Kaneshi District Police Command to get the Dovsu commander to give us police officers, give us, I think, 4 or 5 police officers to go with, to go and do this assignment. We had to pay for the police officers' transportation. We had to pay because they were bitten. We had to pay for their injection. They had to go and inject for tetanus, and we had to pay, literally at the initial stages from my pocket. I had to pay for those. I mean, I don't think that's normal journalism work, but we have to do all of that. And that's what has eventually paid off.
Definitely, just
today.
Tell us how the story ended with the little boy and his mother.
His mother, and I have to doff my hat to the Accra Psychiatric Hospital. They kept the woman. Initially, I had to pay an amount, I think I had to buy a folder or something, to get her admitted. And these vagrants, vagrants are the people with mental challenges who walk on the streets. They did not admit them. You needed somebody to vouch for you, somebody who was going to come for you in events that you had to be discharged, because a lot of them have been abandoned there. But Accra Psychiatric Hospital, against all odds, allowed her, because we didn't have the contact to her family just yet, allowed her to stay in the hospital for literally for weeks before eventually she went to her hometown, where she's still receiving mental health treatment at the district level. Ebenezer, on the other hand, is currently at he's at an orphanage in Nungwa.
Okay.
And he's doing very well. He's in school. He likes math. That is his best subject. He likes to do it. He likes to crunch numbers. And he tells me he's really, really happy that he now has other kids of his age to play with, to talk to, generally to be a kid. 10 years old. Now he has the opportunity to live like a kid and enjoy his childhood. And that for me really is a real award, even beyond the plaque and the citation that we got over the weekend. That Ebenezer is now doing very well, and he's very happy.
Manuel, we are super proud of you. And I'm not saying this to you know, just for the sake of saying it. You've done extremely well, and your ability to see a story beside a story you've been sent for, that is an extra gift. And talk of extra gifts, there's one sitting right in front of me, Jojo Kobna. Jojo Kobna, one of these days, if I win an award, I'll also tell my story. and the way people are mentioning names, I will also have to mention his name. He's very critical in my story. He doesn't like it when I say it, but today the spotlight is on you. Jojo Kobna, once again, very focused on humanitarian stories, the kind of stories he does. Just like Manuel said, you need to go the extra mile.
He just picked up a newspaper which says Child Rights Youth Teacher Union.
He's very focused on human rights issues. That's his heartbeat. And this particular one you did, I mean, we've heard stories about people being accused of witchcraft and all that, but you went a step further to talk about the witch hunters, right? Tell us about that.
Okay, so many times we focus on, the people have been sent to the witch camp, and then that's it, and then they're there, and now I just wanted to look at the violations, the raw violations, the physical violations. When you see the scars, you see the people share the very horrific stories, and then the people actually mentioned the names of the people who actually harmed them. One particular woman, Mary Ibrahim, she listed the number of people who beat her up. Those people were arrested, and then they were eventually, released. And she's very pained by it. So the people who have been hunting the so-called witches, that was the focus. Women do not work, and some of their relatives are not very well off, and so they die there. And then the relatives come for the bodies, go and bury, and it is a problem. It's a problem because someone can just, so if we're in the north, for example, and I look at you and maybe you are being prosperous, like Mary Ibrahim, who was prosperous, selling many others, and then the people are like, how come this woman is very...
She's the old one getting all the market, she's a witch.
She's a witch, and then that happens to her. So I can actually accuse you of being a witch because maybe you said something to me that I didn't really like. And
maybe my hair is nice.
Your hair is too nice. Nicer than my girlfriend's hair. And so you have to go to the witch's camp. It's very ridiculous. And I feel that this is the 21st century. This is more than this. We say we are a democracy, and so we must show it.
Well, one thing I can say for all my colleagues and all the stories they've done is that it's impact-focused, change-driven, and we hope to make a change. We've seen some of them, like Manuel's own, happen quite quickly after the story. But for a story like Jojo's, which won the Best TV Documentary, like he said, there are a lot of processes going on in Parliament. We hope to see the change come as quickly as possible. Congratulations to you guys. We are so proud of you. Congratulations to you, Manuel. All the best. And to all our other colleagues, the Rastas, Richard Kojo-Nyakon, Francisca, who's a freelancer who published a story on Joy Prime, News File, everybody, we say congratulations and thank you for honoring the group once again. It's now time to hear from you, our cherished viewers. Mapito CBD is standing by with social media right after this Tuesday. Once again, thank you so much for staying on the AM show. It's now time to hear your comments, your thoughts on the major issues that we've been discussing this morning. We've been talking a lot about statistics, speaking to government statistician, and also we've been bringing you an update on the CTAC Sensac strike, as well as letting you in on what won the awards for my colleagues who picked up honors during the GJA's award ceremony over the weekend. Well, Mapito CBD is here. Beautiful yellow dress with a beautiful red lipstick.
Venice, how you doing?
I'm good.
Good to see you. Good to have you back.
Yeah. So let us in. What's happening? What are people saying on social media?
I mean, we have been talking about the economy. Things are very tough. We all know that. But what are some of the changes you have made? That's what we're asking you on social media. But before we get to social media, we will be opening our phone lines. The number will be on your screen. So do join us as we ask you how you are coping with the current economic situation or crisis in Ghana. Let's go to Facebook and see what you guys had to say. Ed Fifi Joe says, my rent is due and I have lost my job too. I have no money for transport to go to town to hustle, coupled with the hikes in fares. It's giving me sleepless nights. Hamza Jr. says, good morning. It's been difficult living in the hardship in Ghana. And the painful side is that the government doesn't and has never accepted responsibilities, but they are blaming external crisis. Nana Usu says, God is in control. He provides us with food every day, though I may not have much profits as I used to have in the past 4 years due to the world economic crisis all over. We are hoping for better days ahead. The number to dial is 030-221-1691, 030-221-1692. Back on Facebook, Redeemer says, okay, so Ophelia Osefer says, even my foreign husband is not coping with this economy anymore, decided to go back to Kenya and invest his money instead. What a bad thing. Redeemer says, I have to borrow money every month and I'm now in serious debt. We can't survive if this should continue to the end of the year. Raphael Carter says, government won't save you from this. Most of their family members are living abroad. Okay, so that is according to Raphael. But Ambrose says, it's unfortunate that we have short-term memory. This would not give us lessons or would forget after something little is given to us at the time of election. Too sad for humanity. Kofi says, traders are the ones enjoying. They're making massive profits by increasing their goods every day. How can they increase the price of plantain and blame it on the dollar? We are our own enemies. And Sadat Adam says, please, you guys should talk to Katia Burger Company. They have reduced the ground nuts from 33 to 21. Tell them to bring or add the remaining 12 ground nuts.
But Max, is interesting, you know, this comment about traders blaming the Russia-Ukraine war for the hike in the prices. Yes, I understand that there are people who are taking advantage and profiteering, but what is the percentage of such people?
Yeah.
So you take a commodity like plantain, okay, is grown locally. You ask yourself, why is it so expensive? But just think about it this way. The trader who is bringing the plantain to Accra rents a truck, pays a driver, they cart the produce here. Fuel has increased, so there will be some addition to that. Then Maps, you also think about that trader herself and her condition of living, okay? Yeah. And the fact that everything has increased. And so she's going to town hoping to make money to come and live. Now she has to pay more for water, she has to pay more for electricity. What is the reasonable thing to do? Some people go to their shops and they use lights, and what is the reasonable thing to do? So sometimes we can't just make it make it sound as simple as that. It's 5 CDs in somewhere in Techiman, so it has to be 10 CDs in Accra. It doesn't work like that.
Well, let's go to Obuasi. Richard is calling us from there. Richard, good morning. Richard, good morning.
Yeah, good morning, Benny. How are you?
I'm okay, thank you. But
that's actually my pizza.
Yeah. Yeah, so share your thoughts on any of the stories we've shared so far.
Oh, Mark, sorry. I've been following JoyNews and lots of issues. In fact, sometimes I wonder what kind of a nation are we built? Why is it that our leaders don't really care about us at all? If you look at the issues happening, like Agric Ministry, bringing food staff to the Ministry of Agric to sell on a lower price. This is funny. It's very, very funny. And on the Seglemi housing project, now we heard of some money being lost, the houses rotten, a lot of issues. And sometimes I wonder why that we cannot just do anything right.
Yeah.
It's like these politicians don't really think about the general citizens of the country. It's always in their interest. Why? Why is that our leaders can't get anything right? Look at our situation. I want to ask President Kufuor one question. What is it that he cannot ask the finance minister to step down? What is it that the finance minister is holding? I want to know what is happening. Why is it that the finance minister himself cannot resign? What at all is he doing? I mean, what will happen if he steps down? Would all these his own party people, MPs, asking him to step down, yet he's still holding on to power. Now, the majority MPs themselves have disappointed me. I'm so much disappointed in them that you come to tell us that you want the finance minister to step down, then you turn back to withdraw. Oh, I wonder if we're in any civilized society, the finance minister shouldn't be in power now.
All right, thank you very much, Richard. Let's give space for other callers to share their thoughts. Thank you very much, Richard from Obuasi. Do we have any more callers? All right, well, let's go to Facebook and see what you guys are saying. Francis Aqua says all of Ghana will go to the Mofa and to buy cheaper foods so that the Ministry of Agriculture. Max K says, as Nanado and Baumea and the NPP government messed up the economy badly, how do you expect us to cope with it? We're not magicians to cope with it. Okay, so Foster Pre says, we are triumphant in Jesus, we don't cope. Paul says, who is happy with this economy? Well, he's asking who's happy in this economy. There's no need to still go around to be asking people about this economy. That's what he thinks. Idrisi says, I'm not coping. And this one says, the only food I always eat during this economic crisis is shocking gari without milk. Let's go to the phone lines and go to the eastern region where Nanado is calling us. Nanado, good morning.
Hi, good morning.
How are you?
Please, I'm fine.
All right. Would you like to share your thoughts with us?
Hello, good morning.
Yeah, so what I need you to do is turn down the volume of your television set and please speak up for me, yeah?
Sure. Hello?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, good morning.
Good morning.
Yeah. I want to also share my view on what is happening in the country.
Definitely.
Yeah. I think Ghana has a major problem, and we are all affected in one way or the other, especially the leadership. Because considering our economy and what is happening, it means we are relying on others to survive. And the little thing I know about the Asian tigers, what they did was import substitution, because you should whatever you are doing in your country, whatever you are producing, whether it's not of top quality or what, you need to use it, utilize it, and a time will come that it will be better. So if we don't go that way, it's going to be a long way for us as a country. Okay. Import substitution is going to be the key.
Yeah.
Or else every time we will have to get more dollars, change our money to dollars before we can bring in items, which is going to cripple our economy. Sure. So in the long term, we need to put in that measure. The country has to come together to put in that measure. Others are enjoying from this importation.
Yeah.
Because they have the money, they have the wherewithal, they import, and then they get their money. They don't care about the economy, the general economy of the country. So going forward, we need to do that. And secondly, people are also hiding behind this price hike.
Sure.
They are hiding behind it, and they are adding more to it.
Yeah.
Which is not good. So we need to also come to that term and feel for others, the solidarity. We need to get that we feeling. Because what if you have the capacity to cause harm to your fellow Ghanaian, what are you gaining from it?
Sure.
Then lastly, lastly, what I want to say is that most of the times we talk a lot, but we do little.
Yeah.
We do in all that.
All right, thank you very much, Nanado from the Eastern region. Still on Facebook, Grace Prima says, every day the prices are increasing. Why? Mr. President, please do something because we're suffering too much. Ejukum says, Nanado is the best president so far in our history. Priscilla Mensa says, the person who posted this question, how is he or she coping? I mean, we posted that and we're also not coping. We're trying our best to, get different things to do, cheaper alternatives. Let's go back to the phone lines Good morning. What's your name and where you're calling from? Felix.
Good morning, madam. I'm Felix from Kufuria.
All right.
Yes, I want to contribute to the program.
Sure.
Please, your name. I used to. You are my fan. I used to.
Excuse me?
Enjoy your program. Your name. I like.
Oh, he says he's your fan, Maps.
Oh.
Yeah, she's called
Yeah,
Mapito. She's called Mapito. Maps for short.
Yeah, Mapito something.
CBD.
CBD.
Yes, please, Felix.
All right. I want to ask some questions.
Sure.
It's Ofori Atta, the finance minister, the only person who can be at that ministry. Can't the president sack him?
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people have been international, the opposition, even their own party folks are saying that Oforiatta should step back for another person to take over. Isn't it difficult for the president to do? Is it something difficult? We are begging the president. We are begging him. I think maybe he might be the best for the president, but maybe he stepping back will be a change of so many things.
Yeah.
So we are begging the president. And then my second suggestion is using the Ministry of Agri to selling whatever food product at Agri Ministry.
Yeah.
It's funny. It's funny. It's like we are going back a whole ministry there, the national headquarters, selling plantain and whatever cassava in front of the whole ministry. Where is the country going? We are supposed to go forward as a country, but not rather going back. Why won't the government sit with the middlemen to negotiate well, but rather bringing the farm product straight to the Ministry of Finance in front of them? We are going back.
Sure. Thank you very much, Felix, for that. Keep on watching JoyNews and supporting the brand. Let's just take a few more comments on Facebook, and then we'll try and get our last caller. This one is from Abraham. Says, calculations in Kwa, we can't even calculate anymore. Michael Wordy says, you're talking as if we have options. And Larry Johnson says, 001 and 101 tactics. Bernice, you're aware of do you know the 001 and 101 tactics? So it's either 001, 00 means breakfast and lunch, we're not having it, yeah? We'll have dinner. Or if it's 101, that means breakfast, no lunch,
and then supper.
And then supper, yeah. So that's how people are coping in these current economic times. How are you coping? Is there anything that you've changed with your lifestyle?
So I was speaking to a friend over the weekend, and I said, you know what? I think that carpooling is something people should start doing. There are even too many cars on our roads.
Yeah.
If you live in a community and you work in, maybe not very close, but if you work along the route to a colleague's work
office, yeah,
it just makes sense that you all go together. Maybe this week I'll drive, next week you drive. It helps, okay? Also, if you can't afford it, a group of you come together, buy in bulk and share. Usually it's cheaper that way. So yes, I mean, I must admit, I don't know who hasn't made adjustments to their life.
Yeah.
I want to see that person. That person must be super rich, because even some of my friends I know who own, these V8 vehicles and the amount of fuel they have to pay for now, it's beyond their usual budget. So everybody's making adjustments. Yeah.
Talking about adjustments, Joseph Akable is my neighbor, so we'll try and look at that, going to carpooling.
Yeah.
He'll drive 1 week, I'll drive the other week.
It may make sense.
Yeah. So let's go to our phone lines. Malvin, good morning. Malvin?
Yes, good morning.
Good morning.
Yes.
Yeah, your thoughts on the stories we've shared so far?
I am interested in why the insurance company will raise their premium on their customers when they never had an accident.
You are concerned with what exactly?
the insurance raising their premium on their customers if they never have had an accident.
All right. So, Melvin, what exactly is your concern? I get it. You want insurance companies to raise their premiums?
No, ma'am. I do not want to know. I do not want them to raise it. I want to know why insurance company will raise the premium for their customer when they never had an accident.
Okay, I get it. But I'm sure the insurance companies that offer different packages, but today we are not discussing anything on insurance per se, but we appreciate your concern because I'm sure it feeds into the whole economic conversation. But Melvin, sorry, that's all time will allow us. Hopefully we can hear from you again when we open our phone lines during the week. Maps?
All right, on that note, happy birthday to Paulina, author of the MTN Head Office Accra, from Friends of Saint Mugaga Catholic Church in Kuntunse. Kuntunse. Yeah. We're wishing her a good life, a good health, and God's unending grace on all areas of your life. Bernice Abubedu-Lansa, it's been such a fantastic Monday edition of the AM show.
Definitely.
Yeah.
And I love doing this with you. And our green and you.
And our green and
yellow. Yeah, it's working. It's working. So Mops and I have a thing, I'll put it up on social media. There are times we come to work and we address it in very similar fashion. We don't know how it happens.
It's because, it's the twin sister thing. It's the thing, yeah.
Right, and on that note, we thank you so much for joining today's program. Do make a date with us, God willing, tomorrow at 6 a.m. We start with the news, we follow through with a review and our big stories, and definitely we end with getting very interactive with you. So from Maps, myself, and our colleague Benjamin Akakpo, we say thank you once again. Do stay safe and stay with us. News Desk is up next.